So I think it lasts for 2 years now. We have received funding for two-cycle engine in our budget. So parks got the bigger chunk, streets got some, and facilities got a lesser part because they were already well into the curve of replacing their two-cycle engines. So
this is to replace your equipment in,
yes.
in the department?
Yes. So this is backpack blowers, weed eaters, chainsaw, anything that has a two-cycle engine that we can convert to either a four-cycle engine or to electrical battery-operated type equipment.
And how much of your stock was able to be replaced with that money?
So with the second year, which is this current year, we'll be at 100% by the end of the fiscal year.
Of all possible replaceables have been upgraded or replaced?
Correct. That can be
That's
converted.
Fantastic. And I just want to mention this because the state's CARET program, which was not funded, and I don't believe this is in the public services wheelhouse, and perhaps more of a conversation for us to have with sustainability, I pulled it up here, they had 104 more available, 732 trimmer available. The website blew up. The director of the AQ cited something like 9,000 hits per second when they opened it up at 8:30 in the morning that day in April. It crashed. They quickly gave away all that they had, and literally there were hundreds of thousands of people disappointed who tried to get in on the program and didn't. And when we look at what we can do as a city, we're doing it. But what we can do with our residents, that is not going to be done by the state. We have a great opportunity, and I think what you've done already with our own stock is not the same in terms of what we would turn around and do with our residents, but it's what we should be looking at doing. And so I want to put that out there for our future conversation when we get to sustainability. And I'm proud of us that we're getting this done. Another one, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, without getting into details too much, about funding for positions that are being held open, or what. And I don't know how to get not into the weeds about it, but maybe where people are on paid administrative leave for prolonged amounts of time. And are you looking to be trimming in your HR department, or how are those positions looking? What I'm talking about?
You're talking about. Apologize.
Well, I'm being very clear, and maybe I shall save this for an HR discussion. In order to be more appropriate about that. My last part that I wanted to talk to you about would be about trees. I think Tony Glyat's back there. Tony,
he
are you
is,
here?
and he's so happy to come up to the table.
I'd like that.
As long as he says that he is so happy to be at this table.
And on the spot with us. So while Tony's getting seated, we've made urban forestry a priority as a council body in the past, and we increased funding in the past in order to be planting at least as many trees as we were tearing out. But tree planting is a lot like our own personal health, where it's a lot easier to, or you save a lot of money in healthcare costs if you do a good job of being healthy all the time. And so with our trees, that means pruning and maintenance of our already planted urban infrastructure. And I'm seeing a reduction in that budget allocation this year for pruning and planting. I want, Allison, for you to put this in our unresolved issues that I'm going to be proposing that we increase the proposed amount, and I hope that I have some other council members who might support that. But Tony, can you talk about, I know that Lisa already gave an introduction that says it's hard. We're not going to ask you to put a dollar amount, okay? But can you talk about where we're at in terms of the, it's not an audit, help me out, the survey, thank you, that we gave a little bit more funding to last year, where we're at with that process and how our canopy's looking.
And I'm so happy to be at this table.
Tony, pull that mic right up. And then tell us again how happy you are.
I am happy to be here, actually. So you're speaking about our tree inventory, I believe.
Thank you. Yes.
And the inventory is complete. We have taken delivery of the data and are starting to get everyone in the urban forestry program up to speed in utilizing our new management system with that data. So I have done some preliminary queries to learn a little bit more about the state of our urban forest, and I wouldn't feel comfortable discussing those individual things at this moment because without the right context, we would probably lose the point of it. I will say, though, that it is clear that the number of trees in our on public property throughout the city has been steadily declining, and that we do have some challenges ahead with regard to the overall health of our urban forest.
Thanks, Aaron. Lisa.
And I did, in fact, hear the introduction saying don't ask for numbers, but I still can't resist because it's the kind of thing I like to do. As you know, one of our priorities this year is streets. And I look at the amount, and that it's an increase to $9.8 million from $9.6 million. I know a lot of that is one-time funding. That just doesn't seem like that much money given the needs we have. Can you give us like a ballpark number of what it would really take to address our street and sidewalk concerns?
I would love to call Parviz to the table, and he could give you that answer.
Okay.
Same thing goes for you, Parviz. You're really excited to be at the table.
And he's really excited to be at the table.
Can we pass out treats or something? Because we're happy you're here. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. And so happy I forgot what the question was.
Walking up there, I get that. Just a ballpark of what kind of funding we're talking about to really get our streets and sidewalks where they ought to be. So we wouldn't get a grade D on our streets, so that we could at least maybe get B pluses. I always tell my kids, if it's your best effort, I'm happy with a C. Our best effort shouldn't be a C. I think we should be getting at least a B plus.
If I could meet with you halfway, let me tell you that we are giving it our best effort with the resources that is provided. So as Lisa mentioned at the beginning, the ideal situation and describing where we need to be versus where the will of the council, the mayor, and obviously the residents of the city are. There's a lot of give and take that goes in there. There's certainly some engineering principles that we can rely on figuring out what the roads need, at what time, what is the cost, so on and so forth. But before I answer any further, I need to mention that Salt Lake City is rather unique for the state of Utah because our population of roughly 180,000 after 5 o'clock, it exposed to 330,000. In a daytime situation when everybody is demanding
all those people who use our streets and don't pay a dime for them.
But that was not part of the original question. To answer your question, there is a number of factors. One is we need to look behind and see what we need to do to catch up. We need to look at the present time and see what are the needs and specifics of the city is up and including the dollars available. And we're very sensitive to the fact that those resources are very scarce, and there is a lot of services that are fighting for it, and probably every service has, the right reason to get those resources. So that's one. And then there is the part of what we need to look into the future. And the reason I mentioned the daytime population, because usually that increases our volume. And the roads really go down quick when you consider weather, when you consider the type and number of vehicles that use those roads. So what I can tell you with certainty is that, and it is my hope and desire that we're doing the very best with the dollars that have been provided. If the question is, can there be more put towards the road network to increase the overall health of the city, the answer is yes, clearly.
So I guess my question is, the reason I'm looking sort of for a ballpark figure is, as we are looking for ways to have this happen long-term and with maintenance, I think we need, and you don't need to give us this today, but we need some actual figures of what it will take so that we can look at it and think, okay, is there a fee we can implement citywide for every property owner, regardless of whether they pay property taxes or not, that can help it get us there? Are we talking the kind of dollars that we need to look at bonding and ask the taxpayers to decide if they're willing to tax themselves for better streets? But without a number, it's really hard to know what we're looking at to ask the citizens of Salt Lake City to do. And if we could find a way to capture some help from those who come into our city every day and wear out our roads, I'd like to try to figure that out. We're not London, so we can't charge a fee to come to downtown. We want people to come here. We don't want to scare them off. But I just, going forward, if we could have some numbers that could give us some direction so we know what kind of a solution we are looking for and the kind of money it's going to take.
I would welcome a deeper conversation about that, and I think that we should involve our engineering group in that and our streets folks. And I know that we have many metrics that we could provide that would help you to get a more clear picture of the dollar amounts involved. But again, there's so many factors, right? Are we talking replacement? Are we talking repair? Are we talking, tear out and replace or overlays? I mean, there are a lot of factors that go into this. And for those reasons, I think it's probably more productive for this discussion if we say we would love to keep talking with you about that.
Okay. And I'm kind of looking for streets paved with gold was what I was hoping for.
Yeah,
So if
okay.
you could put that
Now
in
we
there.
have an idea. Thank
I
you.
also, at this point, want to give a shout out and a thanks to our streets maintenance team, because they have a really tough job, and it's hard, and people complain a lot about our streets and the shape they're in. But I know they're doing the very most they can with the resources that they have, and I really appreciate that. But I want to help you all to be able to do the job even better and try to figure out the best way to finance that.
We appreciate that very much, and second your opinion of our incredible streets team. They do a lot with a little, so thank you very much.
To add to that, thank you. It's very nice to hear that actually being verbalized, even though we felt it from the mayor's office, from the council members, and a lot of the residents that take the time to tell us that we're on the right track. There is a great deal of understanding that it takes a little effort to get past. It's a bump in the road, certainly, but we do have metrics. We know for the last better than 15 years we've been collecting our costs and, the unit costs and what it takes to do different things. So we are prepared to, in a position that once that compromise and the picture comes into focus, that we can lend that type of information to validate where we need to go financially.
So both Lisas, I know that this is a council priority for us, and looking into that would be to our advantage so that we can get a jump on that before we bring it up. Dan and then Charlie.
If I might just tag on to that, one of the things we did with our urban forestry in order to accelerate the survey was to contract that out. And I'm wondering if that might be an option worth considering as we do an evaluation of our streets. We've talked about it over several years, and I know that just getting a handle on it's a pretty intensive process considering the how far we're stretching our staff. And so if there's an opportunity to look at potential funding for even a survey or an evaluation for prioritizing some of that street repair or maintenance, it would be helpful for us to have that information. So I don't know if that's part of your current process, but certainly it's something we might want to consider just because of the way we're already tapping into our existing staff.
I appreciate that, and I think in the position that I find myself right now, I think one of the big holes that I need to fill in my education of this process is where engineering is at in that process, because I think that with some key conversations between engineering and our streets department, we can get a better idea of where we are. But I certainly welcome the suggestion that we bring in somebody to help us with the evaluation. Thank you.
So my comments are mostly, I want to build on what Lisa was talking about and what Stan has been talking about. One of the frustrations that I've had in the past has been just the lack of information that we as a council have in terms of what the real needs are. And it's not just, I mean, it's not just your department, but as we talk about the CIP in the next agenda item, we sit here and are trying to figure out how best to develop this budget so that we can, instead of just kind of patching holes and slowly, moving on, we'd like to be in a position where we can make some progress. So one of the requests that I have is that as we continue this discussion and working closely with you and your divisions and department, instead of just giving the full amount and saying, okay, well, this is what it's going to cost to fix our streets, I think if we could have some more concrete options. So, for example, if we were to overlay the streets, this is what it would be. If we were to completely replace them, I've requested in the past a kind of a timeline on what the life expectancy of some of our streets are. When they're going to be up for full replacement, what we can do to stretch the usability and life of those streets out. But I think if the more specific information that we have, as we talk about long-term solutions that Lisa was talking about, it'll give us a much better idea to say, okay, well, this is what we need. This is what we're going to be able to get with that. I think that will help us a great deal. It's not going to happen during this budget cycle. I understand that. But I think for next year and future years, that will be very, very helpful if we have that information. And Stan was talking about parks and having that list. I think that that's exactly, we need it for that as well. We've deferred maintenance on so many things in the city for so long that it is going to be a very, very expensive proposition to get back to where things really need to be. But we need to have that real information so that as we have these discussions, we're not just having theoretical conversations about, well, maybe we need this or maybe we need that. We need to know exactly what the issues are, because I'll just speak for myself, but I'm very committed to working out a solution and fixing some of those things. So any assistance you can provide would be helpful. One of the things I noticed that was not included in the budget was the funding that we allocated for weed abatement on city property. That's something that I would really like to add back in to the budget, because I have a problem when we're enforcing on residents for weed problems and things in their yards, yet on public space we're often the worst offenders, and I think that what we were able to do with that maintenance, what your staff was able to do, has been really, really good. I mean, it cleaned up a lot of areas, and so it's a little issue, but sometimes those little issues are what people really notice, and so I'd like to work back towards that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? Andrew?
Thanks. Quick question about what it looks like for turf. If we're cutting it less than half, realistically, what am I going to see in the parks this summer?
Lee? Are you happy to come to the table?
And a lot of us don't know who you are, so if you wouldn't mind stating your full name and what you currently do with the city?
My name is Lee Bullwinkle. I am the new Associate Director for Parks and Public Lands. I've been with the city for, forever and a day, but just finishing my 34th year with the city. So,
Congratulations.
thank you.
It's awesome.
So I forgot the question.
Reduction in turf maintenance costs. What will the effect be?
Yeah. What's it going to look like this summer with half the funding essentially that we had last year to maintain?
We do have budget allocated for our operating costs, and I fully expected that you would see, turf we had last year or the year before. I don't see us losing turf. We like to keep the infrastructure, the turf in good condition because it just costs us more to bring it back. So I would not anticipate any sign of turf going bad.
Okay. Is that less frequent watering, less frequent mowing, or certain areas may get less attention than they did before at high maintenance areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember that allocation was intended to bring us from a condition that's just kind of okay into let's really take care of some of these spaces. And so we're maintaining all of our public spaces, and Lee and his team, Kristen, the whole Parks and Public Lands team, they do a great job and they have a tremendous amount of pride. So what you're going to notice is that they just don't have the resources available to kind of take it to that next level. They're going to maintain all of our public spaces and do their best not to lose turf, but it's not as easy.
No, I totally understand. Thank you for your efforts. The second thing I want to reiterate also what was said earlier, that I would really like us to tackle these bigger issues, the long-term maintenance issues, the catching up on, you name it, streets. We're going to talk about curb and sidewalk next, just maintenance of facilities, their forestry, all those kind of things, right? They all need a lot of money over multiple years, most likely. So the more, I echo the sentiment, the more specific information we have, what's the scope of the issue we're looking at, what's the potential to break it down to sections to fund, would be very helpful to make the decisions we're going to have to make to tackle it, because I think we have to tackle it. So thank you very much for that in advance and your service.
Anyone else? Aaron, follow-up question?
Did anyone talk about facilities maintenance money? Let's talk about facilities maintenance money. So there's the shift to get that out of CIP and into the regular budget for you there. And there's a giant decrease, 41% decrease. I appreciate hearing that we're not going to lose any turf with a reduction in that budget, but buildings are a little bit different than grass. So how are we justifying a 41% decrease in our facilities maintenance budget? It seems also that this is a bit unpredictable. Things go wrong. We can predict that things will go wrong and not necessarily which things will go wrong. So how do we manage with such a gigantic decrease in that budget?
Thank you for the question. And Jim.
And you'll happily hand it off.
I'll happily hand it off to Jim because he's happy to be at the table as well.
I am. I'm Jim Cleveland. I'm the facilities director. And over the past 4 years, facilities has been able to use any of the funding that was provided. So although we'd always like to have more, we use what we have.
That's not the answer, though, Jim. I know I'm putting you in a tough spot. But I think like many people who live in the city, my house is over 100 years old. Some years we get off lucky. Most of the time we don't. And we can't really predict when the pipe's going to explode or the boiler is going to go out. But the reality is buildings break down. We have a lot of old buildings, like everyone does.
You're right.
And I don't doubt that you use every penny that we allocate to you every year, no matter what. But this is more than a trim. This is a cutting a body almost in half.
I would like to say also that in moving that money from CIP into general fund does not preclude us from competing for CIP funds as well. And Jim will continue to compete for those CIP funds. What this money does is it moves it from CIP into general fund so that that amount he doesn't have to compete for.
So we'll see you back at CIP, except
I'm here for the show.
for the whole show. I guess we'll have to see how this pans out then.
And, you know, it's still general fund money, right?
Yes.
CIP and general fund is still
Yeah.
general fund.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron.
Sometimes we mean to allocate things in a later budget, and we really promise we're going to do it. And then we have to be reminded that we promised, so.
Some
I'm not
people's
making any promises.
Some people's promises, you know. So just a last question, and that's in regards to the impound lot. What happens July 1? There's no funding to it.
So we have a plan in place, but it would be...
Here comes the impound man.
Yeah, here he comes. Isaac's happy to come to the table. Thanks, buddy. Excited to come to the table. Yeah, so we do have a plan in place if the decision is made to close the impound lot, but it would be a phased process. Fortunately for us in the compliance department, all of our employees have the same job title, regardless of whether they work at the impound lot or for our compliance arm. And so we would have a phased move of those employees from impound to our downtown operations. We also have several cars at the impound lot that we would systematically sell. We're also proposing to retain the supervisor and support staff that currently run that operation because it's very important for us to maintain level of control over the impound process, regardless of whether they're coming to our lot or to a private lot. So those folks will still be on our staff, and we'll continue to take care of that business until we can phase it out. And then ultimately, the hope would be that we could either lease that space to a private entity or, transfer it to another city department that might be able to utilize it.
Okay. And I think that is it, unless anyone has any.
No,
Lisa?
Sorry, one more thing. Just, council members, I don't know that we're persuaded that we ought to close the impound lot when we've heard all the complaints that we have about it done privately. So I think that probably belongs on the unresolved issues list for us to make a decision. I've made up my mind how I feel about it, but I would throw out there that we do some things that cost us money, like, we don't make money from recycling, but it's the right thing to do and we want to do it. And I'm wondering if providing that service for people, it's already really is a crappy thing when your car gets towed, but to have to pay a lot and then have somebody, say, oh, I only take cash, and have to go find an ATM and all that is really a pain. So I'm trying to figure this out, but I think it's a conversation we need to have.
Mr. Chair, may I add in addition, I think there's some information we need to probably gather from the police department, because I understand they're not using our impound facilities, and I don't know if that would I don't know that that would eliminate the deficit, but it may have some impact on the deficit for operating that facility too. So I'm not quite sure of the formal process of requesting information there. Cindy, can you help me with that, or?
I think you saying it
Just
here
it.
will cause our staff to
All right.
ask the administrative staff, but they already know we're going to ask because they're here
Okay,
with us.
great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know you enjoyed your time at the table, the entire Public Services Department, so thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move on to item number 4, which is the capital improvement projects, the CIP overview. We have Ben Ludke with council staff here somewhere. There he is. Who's hiding? Mike Ackerlow, who's with Housing and Neighborhood Development, and Holly Draney, who's Capital Improvement Program Specialist. And council members, this is the beginning of a longer conversation as well. So this is our introductory opportunity to discuss the CIP overview.
I'll take it away. I guess I'm starting. Good afternoon. I want to take you through just a short presentation on CIP, give you a little bit of background of where we are, dollar amounts that we're looking at, application and so forth. So this year we are looking, we had about $70 million in CIP requests. About $4 million, 3.991 in Class C, and about 2.6 in impact fees. The actual transfer amount from the general fund to CIP is $16,523,528. And we have debt service obligations of $11,456,000. So after that, after we pay off take care of our debt service obligations, we have remaining 4.2, almost 4.3 for our pay-as-you-go projects. However, we also have that, we call it the triggered amount, which is that increase that we may see in June from sales tax, and we'll know that on June 8th, I believe, and that amount is $787,484. So with the 4.2 and the 700,000, we are estimating $5,067,177 for the pay-as-you-go projects. Just so you know, and you're familiar with this already, we have the debt service on the ice sheet up at Steiner, and the city is responsible for those payments for the next few years through 2020. So CIP pay-as-you-go will be reduced, unfortunately, for those years while we take care of that debt service. So you have a couple logs. We broke them up a little bit differently this year. We gave you a debt service log as well as a project log. And the debt service log also includes the percent for art, contingency, deferred maintenance, although that has been transferred to public services, some other funding sources, surplus land, and CDBG CIP. And the reason we do that for two reasons, to show you the full picture, but also as our staff works on supplying information to the finance office, finance department, it's just a clear way to communicate and make sure we're covering all of our bases. The pay-as-you-go log has 3 tiers, and this is, I think, probably our 3rd year of doing this. So the first tier are those departments and divisions prioritized. So tier 1 would be projects they could do this year, tier 2 next year, and the tier 3 preferably in the 3rd year. That, of course, doesn't mean that you can approve any project from any tier, but this is the recommendation from those who put the applications in. And within those tiers, those projects are also ranked by priority. The constituent applications that we receive are not ranked, but they are reviewed and by the departments and divisions. Oftentimes, the applicants will work with those department and divisions to get accurate numbers, so they're usually familiar with what's going on, and if not, we make sure that they get those applications. And then finally, on your log, you'll see kind of a coding, you'll see a little coding system on the left. For example, you'll see one that says T-T1-P1. And just so you know, as you have your conversations, what this means is transportation is the first T. It's a tier 1, which is a T1, and then it's a priority 1. And you'll see how that goes, how that's referenced on the log. So let me just show you some breakdowns quickly. So we had about 70 applications received, and you can see a breakdown here. Parks had 22, transportation, facilities, and streets 11. We had 10 constituent applications and 5 for CAM projects. And then you can also see a breakdown of where those projects are per district. Keep in mind that there's some information behind the council district numbers. A lot of these are citywide. Some projects may cover 2 or 3 districts. And so if you add those numbers up, they equal more than 70, but that's because they may cover more areas. Here's a breakdown of the request from the general fund by dollar amount and percentage. You can see there on the left that parks and transportation facilities are really between $7 and $8 million. It looks like it might be broken up on the screen a little bit. Streets at about 2.6, although that does not include Class C or impact fees, so their amount is actually significantly more. And then constituent applications, we had about $4 million. And on the right, you can see the percentage of overall applications from those different departments. And then finally, the mayor's, this is a pie chart of the mayor's recommendations for CIP, and you can see that there's a real emphasis on streets this year. This $6 million is general fund and Class C and impact fees, but it does not include the $7 3/4 million that is also being proposed for streets. So with the priority towards street, you can see significant funding going towards street projects. Mayor really wanted to make sure that we got back to basics and focused on needs and not wants this year. So you'll see that reflected in her recommendations to the council. Let me just make a couple final comments. As you know, on that debt service for the SARS payment, the council set aside for the last 2 years $500,000 each year to be used towards those payments. So we still have that set aside, and that was smart forward thinking on your part, and we'll be using that to help reduce that debt service. Also, as mentioned by Public Services, the deferred maintenance was not funded through CIP, but was moved into their operation budgets. And then finally, there was one project that we've gotten more information about after the mayor made her recommendations, and that is the 6th North and 8th West constituent application, where they're requiring some bulb outs and some flashing pedestrian signals. The mayor asked us to see if there's some other funding sources that we could use, and we did that, and transportation has some pedestrian safety money to put towards those flashing crosswalk signals, so they'll be doing that. And they've also given us a dollar amount of about $35,000 for 2 bulb outs. So that is something that the mayor would like to include in her recommendations to you all, that if that's something that we would like to see funded, the community would really like to see those improvements go in, because it is a dangerous intersection.
Are we talking about Hawkeyes, or are we talking about that are like 130,000, or are we talking about less?
They're the crosswalk
Fancy.
signs that actually
Okay.
flash.
That are like,
Correct.
what, 80,000? 20,000, okay, thanks.
So the remaining balance would be $35,000 from CIP to put the bulb outs in.
And are
Can you repeat that one more? I didn't hear that.
Sure. So the $20,000 for the flashing pedestrian sign, and then $35,000 for the bulb outs.
So will there be 2 flashing signs?
I'm going to ask Robin.
Robin Hutchison?
That's a good idea.
And this carries over too. You have to tell us how excited you are to be at the table.
And will you tell us if they're on the log right now?
This project?
Yeah.
So what's proposed at 6th North and 8th West is improving one leg of the crosswalk to enhance pedestrian safety and really channelize the pedestrians to the place with the most protection. We would install pedestrian flashing signals, which, as Councilmember Rogers has said, are the triangular flashing pedestrian signals on each side. So that's a total of 2 signs, one on each side of the street. We can, out of our existing pedestrian safety funds, ones that we have today, fund the signal portion of it. And then we've scrubbed down the estimate for 2 bulb outs and an improved crosswalk, textured crosswalk for increased visibility. And the remainder of that is $35,000, and that's an unfunded portion.
Councilmember Mendenhall, too. It's the first application in the constituent section, which is towards the end of the log. It's the last couple of pages.
Are you saying that the mayor's changing her recommendation, or you're just giving the council a piece of information?
Giving the council a piece of information.
Okay, so the piece of information is that the $20,000 will be funded within existing resources, and the $35,000 is not funded, and you're encouraging the council to find that funding?
Correct. That is, the mayor would like to see, based on new information and community input recently, would like to see if the council would be willing to fund that.
So, but usually there would be a source suggested. But I'm just clarifying.
Right,
I'm not trying to torture you. So we don't have a source, but we have the need. Okay.
Right.
Stan?
Mike, I appreciate the challenge of the competitive CIP process, but one of the concerns over the years, and I'll use transportation safety as an example, is that we also end up with safety issues in a competitive process. And I know it's been a frustration around some of these transportation and street issues in particular, where we are saying there's a safety issue, like a crosswalk, but we're putting it in a competitive process. Have you done any evaluation as to how we might prioritize those based on safety concerns, or have we had conversations about moving those into a general fund budget process so that we're not actually competing over safety when we're looking at CIP?
So we haven't had the discussion on the latter part, which is a really interesting one to have, I think. And yeah, it's tough because you're right, it is a competitive process. Typically, pedestrian safety devices, signals, road work are high priorities for the departments, and they typically receive some kind of funding. It's usually not in full because of the competitive nature, but there is usually something. And typically, the departments or divisions also give us a prioritized list of what those projects may be. Here's Robin.
Just adding that, you'll notice that one of the applications from transportation is focused on safety, and it's really safety for all modes. Behind that application is some robust analysis about where in the city our highest needs are, and we program those funds out accordingly. When there's a community application, we recognize that their perception is reality and it's important to them. We check the data to see that this is one of the locations that is indeed higher on the list, but we are reticent to bounce other ones off in order to fund one that may have a higher or lower need. So when you see pedestrian safety or just traffic safety in general, which is how it's presented this year, know that there's analysis behind it that helps us rate and rank the projects that we put forward.
And I recognize, Mike, going forward that we're talking about limited funds. That's the reason we're having these conversations. I appreciate that. But the mayor did some initial work in some of the other areas of the budget to start shifting some of these things that end up in a deferred maintenance in a competitive process that really should be in a regular annual maintenance process. And I'm just wondering if we might want to consider adding safety to that sort of similar assessment of whether or not that should just be incorporated dollar amount in our annual budget rather than saying we're going to make it be a competitive CIP process.
I think it's a great idea and something we'll explore.
Okay, thanks.
Aaron.
The second piece under the constituent section is a lane reconfiguration at Whittier Elementary on 3rd East, which is, of course, the elementary that backs up against the Salt Lake Community College campus. And this is one that came out of the Liberty Wells Community Council with the support of former chairperson? No. Superintendent Mikkel Withers, thank you, took me a second there, because they're proposing, it's not just a pedestrian safety, this is a kids' pedestrian safety issue where we have no lane pullouts for buses, and I know we don't mean to get into the weeds here, but this is a really important safety issue, which happens to coincide nicely with the district's own considerations of adjusting the playground at that very spot where they would be adjusting the fence line, and they are in support of this community's recognition that we have cars pulling into oncoming traffic to get around buses where there is no bus lane turnout, and inadvertently plowing through the kids' crosswalk right there at the mouth of the school, at the opening of the school. It's a very dangerous situation, and how unique that we have the school district saying, we're looking at doing construction in this very area, and perhaps we could work together and save each other a little bit of hassle and improve the pedestrian safety of this school. And so when I look back at this very last slide you have here, and the only thing that's cut out is constituent, and then we're opening the constituent box here now without looking at a budget balancing recommendation, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to be pushing for this Whittier Elementary lane configuration. If we're going to be looking at pedestrian safety, I'm going to be pushing this, and we should be considering constituent recommendations. They are needs. They aren't necessarily wants, and this is one that is a serious need.
If there's any information we can get you, please let us know.
Council members, any other questions? Mike, I think it's just important to point that if you look at the constituent projects, that actually, number one, the 600 North, 800 West intersection safety was recommended by the CDCIP board for full funding. And that was the only one besides the Sugar House Park roadway maintenance that was recommended. Council member, this is directed towards you in regards to this 600 West, 800 North project. It's a dangerous intersection. 2 people have died in the past 4 years there. You should see people run across the street as cars are coming down 45, 50 miles an hour. It's the only off-road, I think it's the only off-ramp in the city that does not have a stoplight at the bottom of it. There's one at 900 West, but not one at 800 West. And I see kids running across the street for their lives every single day when I drive home, trying to get home to the apartments to the north. It's a scary, scary intersection. So I appreciate the mayor finding some money to fund part of it, but really, 2 bulb outs, I would look to fund the whole thing for it. It's not only that, it ties in well with 2 of our priorities. First of all, streets. It's going to slow the traffic down, as well as beautification for economic development in District 1, 2, and 3. This is actually in Stan's District 3. So it's just something to make note of, that it is a critical intersection. There are only 3 ways really to get into District 1 from the east side. That's 600 North, North Temple, and 300 North. 2 of them are overpasses. One of them has a railroad that a train goes by and stops, and kids that are going to West High, guess how they get by the train? They crawl over or under the railroad cars. It's extremely dangerous to go east to west. So I would implore council members here to make sure that this is fully funded, to make it a safe place for people to cross the street. Now that I've gone on my soapbox, let's any questions for Mike or Ben while he's here? Stan?
Just have a follow-up for both Mike and Ben. I was just chatting with Councilmember Mendenhall. I think it was 2 years ago, Wasatch Elementary did a turnout into the public right-of-way their school, and I don't recall if that was a school-funded project or a city-funded project or a combination, but I'm wondering if you could do a little research for us and find out, because I'm wondering if there's an opportunity maybe to talk with the school board and see if they can find some additional money for a safety issue there. But I just don't recall who funded that or how.
Yeah. Okay, we'll look into that. It doesn't ring a bell, but that was a couple of years ago. And
it was at least 2 years ago. Okay. It may have been funded 3 years ago. So.
Okay, we'll look at that. And I know the CDCIP board felt the same way, wanting to have more dialogue with the school district to see what they could help fund.
Council members, any more questions for Mike? We're letting you off easy on the first discussion. Thanks, Mike.
When is it coming back?
Next week?
I think the 7th.
7th? We have 90 minutes coming up on, it is the 7th, isn't it? Yeah.
And are we anticipating that time we'll start going through projects? Is that the goal? Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. We're going to move on. We're going to skip the break and move on to item number 5, Salt Lake City Curb and Gutter and Infrastructure Study. We have council staff here with Jennifer Bruno, Ben Ludke, Laura Briefer from Public Utilities, she's the director, and the deputy director, Thomas Ward. Is Tom here? I don't think Tom is here, is he? There he is.
We also have Jason Brown, our engineering manager, here too.
Welcome, Jason Brown.
Thanks. So good afternoon, and thanks for inviting us to talk a little bit about our curb and gutter study. This, as you might recall, was something that was part of a council legislative intent in 2013. We have since gone through and assessed about 1,000 miles of curb and gutter and put our findings in this report. Jason Brown managed that project, and I want to point out too, we have 2 of our staff engineers here, Christine Schumacher and Nathan Page, who also put quite a bit of work into this project. I was going to let Jason kind of go through and talk about the methodologies and findings of the report, and then open it up to any questions, if that sounds good. Great.
Okay.
first off, with public utilities, we have a method of doing anything with it when it's in regards to assets. So when we were given this legislative intent, we needed to understand what we needed to do as far as collecting the information, inventorying it, to do a condition assessment, a criticality assessment, and then from that we were able to develop cost estimates and repair methods. And that's what we usually typically call our asset management program. It's something we use on all four of our enterprise funds, our sewer, water, storm drain, and lighting. It's something we're really good at, and we enjoy actually doing it as an engineer, so it's a little good. So the first thing is asset management. Inventory. Our stormwater crews went out in their daily activities. We equipped them with iPads, and they were able to actually take pictures and inventory I don't want to say every, but just about every single curb and gutter in the city. Over 1,000 miles of curb and gutter that were inventoried.
If you didn't get some, Lisa has pictures of most of them in her district.
Okay.
They're not pretty.
We actually have on our website a interactive map that you can actually go and look at those and see where the actual maps or the inventory was taken. So you can see them yourself, too. From that, we developed, in our asset management, we had to get the inventory. And then we had to determine what kind of defects were there. We identified 5 different types of defects. They were either a street slope or a grade issue, a missing curb and gutter, a raised curb and gutter, a settled curb and gutter, or a tree root had caused the gutter to raise or settle. And so those were the 5 categories that we identified, every piece of every defect that we identified. And we identified about 5,300 defects throughout the city. Let's get back here. The next step was to understand what we could do with these defects. Because in order for us to develop a cost estimate, we needed to know how to repair them. So each of these defects, we identified actually a total of 6 different methods to repair them. And we had identified 5 defects, but identified 6 ways to repair them, because a lot of these defects are not just related to the gutter itself. Sometimes they require a complete road reconstruction, and that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult and more expensive also. So the 6 methods that we identified were to repair the curb and gutter, just a panel, about a 20-foot section of curb and gutter. We could just replace that. And that was easily done through our stormwater utility fund. That could be done through our stormwater utility fund. The other types were a tree. In a tree instance, we contacted the urban forester and talked to them, and they said that you can cut the root out, but eventually the tree is going to grow right back, and you're going to have the same problem. So they recommended that we, in our cost estimates for tree root issues, include about $1,000 of a tree removal. They also said that any of the tree removal will have to be done on a case-by-case basis, and so we were just being very careful as to how we identify those. The third method was to install a catch basin and associated pipe. And how we did that was we had our GIS maps of all the information. We knew where our existing infrastructure was, and so we were able to draw what we call buffers around some of these pipes or these defects. And then with that, if we were within 200 feet of an existing storm drain, we were able to say, okay, we can do that kind of method there. And so we identified each of those. The 4th method was a road repair. And generally, if we couldn't get the curb and gutter to be repaired just by staying within that 2.5 feet of the concrete, we had to go out into the asphalt, and that's when we started triggering having to do a road repair. Then the 5th method was a brand new curb and gutter. Many of the defects that we identified, they didn't have curb and gutter. It wasn't there to begin with, and so we need to install some. And then the 6th one is a little bit unique in that it's only found in the avenues area. The curb and gutter is functioning. It works exactly like it's supposed to. It's to convey the water. But if you've been there, the gutters are very deep. They're steep, and they cause issues with the driver approaches. Sometimes we get leaves or whatever get stuck there. So that we categorize that separately from everything else, just because it was a little bit different. And that's the sixth method, and we refer to that as an aesthetic repair, because also there are places when the gutter is functioning perfectly, it's conveying the water, but it's broken up or whatever, and so we needed to find a category for that. So as we identified each of these different repair methods, we developed cost estimates for every single one of them. Standard curb and gutter replacement's about $75 per foot. Then the next method has the additional tree, which is another $1,000, so that's a little extra there. The complete roads is about $550 per foot per lane of travel. So that's just a single lane. If you're doing 2 lanes, then you're obviously doubling that. So it quickly escalates as far as costs go. And the sixth method, or for the sixth repair, was the aesthetics. That's about $80 a foot, and that, again, mainly is in the avenues area. Also, when we developed these cost estimates, we included a 15% engineering fee for them and then a 20% contingency. At this level of the report, we didn't have good numbers exactly to know exactly what's going to happen, so we put a little bit of contingency in those. The last part of this, I failed to mention the criticality aspect of our asset management. So we got the condition, we knew that. The criticality is another factor that we use to help us identify which projects are prioritized and how they eventually make it into the budget. For the curb and gutter, criticality was determined based on the life safety issue. And fortunately, most of the curb and gutter doesn't have a high criticality, meaning that if the curb and gutter is not there, it's not going to cause somebody possibly to lose their life, or there's going to be lots of property damage. For the vast majority of our infrastructure, curb and gutter is considered a 3, so we're pretty good shape there. Also, the vast majority of our condition was also a 3, but there were some 4s and 5s that we identified. The next step was to be able to identify funding sources. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So if you have the report, Chapter 7 discusses the funding options. And what we really recommend is that the city take an approach that incorporates what's called a concept called complete green streets. There's a concept also called complete streets, which addresses pedestrian safety, automobile safety, bicycle safety, mass transit. The complete streets concept then also brings into a water quality issue, where we're treating the water at the source in swells or permeable pavement or something along those lines. So we're treating it at the source, and then that allows us to then treat and discharge the water and stay within the regulatory compliance of the state and the federal government at our streams.
Do you mind if I interrupt a little bit? I think it might be also important to just talk and summarize a little bit about how the stormwater utility operates. We operate as a cost of service utility, and we assess a fee to all impervious areas to calculate the fee that's associated with our stormwater bill. For the city, all streets are impermeable and would be subject to this fee, but when the stormwater utility was set up in 1991, it was decided through a lot of study and public process that, like other communities, the city streets would be exempt from the stormwater fee, and in exchange for that, the street repair, the general fund would pay for a lot of these types of curb and gutter projects, with the exception of the storm drain inlet and curb and gutter on 10 feet from either side of the inlet. And so this kind of segues into when the complete green streets concept and the unique and I think very close collaborative working relationship we have with engineering and streets and public services on anything that we do in the streets and with curb and gutter.
Yeah, that's a significant point. So evaluating we have all the conditions, we know how to fix them, we've got cost estimates. The executive summary, table 3, shows a breakdown of each of those costs and the different methods, how to repair them. The total is $109 million to repair all of the defects that we identified. Of that $109 million, roughly $9 million of that would be directly related to the stormwater utility fund.
As it's currently structured.
As it's currently structured, correct.
I wanted to make that clarification.
Did you say all of it? Is that what you're saying? Will you repeat that?
Okay, so-
$109 million to repair the whole kit and caboodle.
Right.
$109 million of it would be,
No.
sorry, I knew I missed that.
It would
Did you
be
say-
about a little over 8 million, or close to 9 million.
Right.
To-
9
Of
million.
the 109?
Yes.
Right.
8 would come from stormwater.
Right,
Okay.
based on the current policy.
Okay.
Cindy has something to say.
I think just the thing that needs to be emphasized here is what I think what the council had previously expressed is a desire to look at this anew. And so focusing on the previous or the current policy is one slice of information, and it might be the smallest slice of information, because we have a new mayor, we have new council members, and it's been a long time since that was set up. So I've had the impression that what the council has wanted is to see more policy options so that they can look at this kind of with a clean slate.
So, first off, thank you very much for this information. I appreciate how comprehensive this study is. And I also appreciate your collaboration with engineering and the levels. I think that's incredibly helpful. If you were sitting in the audience, you've heard us talking about how do we prioritize, how do we figure out how to phase this. So that's really helpful to do. I have a couple of questions that are stormwater related, but may not be included in this. And we've talked a little bit about the needs going forward of mitigating some of our stormwater to meet new EPA requirements. And I'm wondering about on-site street mitigation, like we're seeing in a lot of other communities where they're doing swells and that sort of stuff. Is that something we are exploring? And I'm wondering how that might impact this going forward, because that would require quite a significant reconstruction of sections of street and curb and that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering if that's considered in here, or if you've thought about that going forward and what that might look like.
So the good news is your line of questioning approaches how we'd like to approach. If we were starting from scratch to build streets, that's what we're looking at as we have new development. In terms of solving this problem, that collaboration that our engineering team had with the city engineers is the Complete Green Streets presents that opportunity. You know, if you have stormwater and you have to convey it from my house all the way to the Great Salt Lake, we have to build infrastructure to get it there. But if we treat and contain it right in front of my house in a swale, there's benefit there, in addition to the other parts of that Complete Green Street. And then there's the water quality benefit. As you look at the tiers of that, that $108 million, $109 million is just broken down, that large portion of it is, in a sense, rebuilding part of the street and the curb and gutter, and we see that as an opportunity of using the Complete Green Streets approach when we reconstruct those. Obviously, it's a very sizable financial contribution just on the curb and gutter side, but once we say we're solving that and it has a street reconstruction too, you have other costs. So that's the bad news. The good news is, as you go to solve a curb and gutter problem, we can maybe solve some of the roadway repaving issues and come up with a street that is built to our current understanding of water quality, stormwater control, and the other benefits to the community. So we're thinking along the same lines.
So, but the anticipation of containment of stormwater at the site of generation, it isn't necessarily incorporated in this, but it provides an opportunity to have that conversation. Is that what, am I hearing you correctly?
Yes and yes, in the sense that Jason, there was a portion that you thought that the solution was redoing the road.
Right.
And when we look to redo the road, we're going to be looking specifically at
It's swell
the swales.
circuit.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So that could be, was that factored into your cost estimates there?
Yes.
Okay. So in those projections where you've got curb and gutter and a road reconstruction, there would be some opportunity for containment in those stretches.
There could be. Every street's going to have to be evaluated to see
Right.
if that's the case, yes.
And I think it takes quite a bit of coordination with our other city departments as well, because streets isn't our responsibility, and I know that there are other values that we're trying to incorporate, but that was something that we coordinated very much with engineering at this point in the process.
And if I might just add one more layer to this for my information, as you were looking at this, did you have an opportunity to mesh this with any additional stormwater work that you were that's in our plan, like in our 10 and 20-year plan? And I'm thinking there were some additional lines that were included there and maybe some upgrades of some lines in parts of the city. Did that get incorporated into this too, or is that still sort of standing independently of this process?
It's standing independently
Okay.
at this point.
So there may be some opportunity savings there as well, where we might have to do a replacement or improvement or a new line that could incorporate some curb and gutter or water containment at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
If I might add on the analysis and what you might, as you deliberate if and how to solve this solution is, take the entire forest or a piece at a time, this complete green streets option, one way to approach that would be a partial funding where we can work with the city engineering on their prioritized streets that need improvement. And if there's an overlap of a curb and gutter with a high need, that becomes an opportunity for these pilot projects for us to do that the right way, get some experience under our belts, both in efficacy on how that's done, the costs, and then the acceptability to use our council and our constituency. So that might be one approach that you could consider of not eating it all at once, but starting methodically at doing what we think is a good approach and we're hoping it's consistent with your views and interests.
Go for it, Aaron.
I want to go back to the $1,000 for tree removal.
Yes.
Does that include tree replacement? I know that was the urban forester talking, but.
Yeah, it did. Yeah,
for a smaller tree, huh? Do you see the problem, people? Do you see what Charlie, did you hear that? Tiny trees?
Maybe it would replace 4 smaller trees.
No, it doesn't. It's one. It's one tiny tree. And sometimes as council members, we get on a soapbox about impound lots or about parking, and I'm about to get on a soapbox about a beautiful silver maple tree that lived in front of my house and is about 35 years old. And not as part of this program that we're trying to envision, but as part of our regular sidewalk maintenance, the sidewalk in front of my tree was getting replaced, and it had buckled, and it was part of the tree. And I sat out on the porch, this was before I was a council member, and watched these people take a hacksaw to the root of my tree, the base roots of my tree, and hack at it. I said, please wait, what are you doing? They said, well, we asked the urban forester to come out, but they haven't come out, so we got to schedule, we got to keep going. And I literally cried. And the urban forester came out and said, they shouldn't have done this, and I'm so sorry, and it's the stabilizing roots, and some big bad wet storm someday, that tree's going to topple that direction. Not on your house, on your neighbor's house. But what a travesty there that was. And I think that I'd like you to talk a little bit about, we're talking about this big vision, and I mostly want us to focus on that because that's part of the beauty of the work that we get to do, is be hopefully visionary about ways to rethink. But in the meantime, when we are approaching, and maybe we should invite Jeff to come up to the table, but when we're approaching trees and sidewalks today, I think about that $1,000 for tree removal, and I don't like it. And I realized then that we're looking at an expedited and more regular replacement of that very piece of sidewalk as the tree grows and continues to grow. And I wonder how long that, how often we end up having to do that, what that cost kind of looks like. And to me, it's worth it, even though you haven't answered the question yet. It's worth it to have these large trees shading our urban neighborhoods.
I'm in agreement. I completely agree with you. Couple things. We take advantage of mud jacking as far as sidewalks are concerned, which basically is the method of pulling the sidewalk panel up over the roots. So you're seeing this more often. We started using that method recently.
After my tree.
Unfortunately, I don't know. But that is something, again, we are very aware of, again, trying to maintain this precious resource that we have with our trees, our urban forest. And I think, as far as curb and gutter is concerned, incorporating some of these green street principles, complete street principles, that's part of the equation here. Instead of running curb and gutter all the way through, and we have roots up here, maybe there's opportunities to do it differently. Create a French drain, gets the water past, we can shallow up a gutter or something. I think that there's a lot of opportunities like that to preserve our trees. And we're looking, again, we're working towards, and I want to have a few test streets that we're going to do here in the near future, looking at these principles and trying to incorporate these.
Can we help you with that? Do you need is there any policy help that you need in getting more creative about how we keep our existing trees in the ground instead of just looking to replacement?
Well, I'm not sure. Right offhand,
You
I
let me
can't
know
think
if
of
you
that.
do.
I will, definitely. But I do think if we look at things differently as engineers, we can find solutions to keep our urban forest. In very rare cases would we lose that, lose a tree, if we look at it differently. And as Tom mentioned, again, I think long-term, your vision, if you are able to contain a lot of your stormwater flows from going downstream, again, you're reducing costs of maintaining and upgrading these downstream systems long-term. So there's a lot of payback in approaching stormwater in this fashion. And as far as sidewalks, we're going to be more careful.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeff.
You bet.
So on your maps, you identified places where you think you must remove the tree. Are those still up in sort of discussion, or is that definite, this is probably the only way to do it?
This is not, we have not identified direct locations where they need to be removed.
Okay.
We just, when we were out there doing the inventory, they saw the curb and gutter raised up and there's a tree next to it, they marked it as a tree issue.
Okay.
It was pretty simple.
So I was just looking at the maps and saying how it's, in some areas, pretty clustered.
Yes.
So the issue is a tree here versus the avenues is one flat brown dot. So right now, that's still up to debate and discussion about what solution, possible solution. Right now, the recommendation would be removal of the tree, but not necessarily the determination.
No. The recommendation is that we look at these at a case-by-case basis. That we do not just remove the tree. We're going to look at each and every instance or defect on a case-by-case basis.
We had to make some assumptions for cost purposes on that.
Sure. So when folks look at this map online, which is available online, and they see that it says remove tree or repair curb gutter, and you can't get down to the fine detail, see if it's your street necessarily, but it's pretty close. Make sure they're clear that that's a recommendation, but not necessarily the definitive answer to that.
Definitely make that
That's
change.
great. There's two steps that would happen. One would be a funding mechanism that, that's a dialogue with you as the council. The second one is actual project design, and our approach on those is there's a dialogue with the property owners as we look at, here's our solution. Do you see us approaching it the right way? So in the instance that you mentioned of the tree being cut, if that's a no, if that's the only engineering solution that we can come up with, there's a go, no-go in terms of that conversation with the community. So there's a couple steps there. There won't be, one, we're not going forward and taking care of these because we don't have the funding. The second one would be in terms of actual project design, and then construction includes a dialogue. One, some standards set by, with our collaboration with you as council, and then second, a dialogue with the community.
And if I can say, I mean, in all these instances, we'll have to work closely with the urban forester to, again, have their buy-off that this is the correct method, whether we're containing water differently or we're looking at a removal of a tree. Sometimes that is the best answer, depending on the age of the tree and everything, too. So we would work closely with the urban forester on a case-by-case basis.
I want to interject here that we, in tandem, have been having a conversation with the urban forester about the size of the trees and the options that are available to residents. And I'd hope that as we find ways to work around big trees, that at the same time we are making sure that urban forestry is making it possible for us to have those larger canopy trees really come back into the stream. And I know we just left it, but with the recommended budget, we are again losing more trees than we are planting starting next year. And we just reversed this last year, and it would be such a shame for us to let it slip back into where we're losing more trees than we're planting. Okay, I'm done now.
I'm sure you're all familiar with the challenge in my district is that weird one southern boundary intersects in lots of places with the county. And so a lot of times we'll have a drainage problem or a curb and gutter problem, and we have to work with the county. I'm aware of one that you just worked on within the past probably 6 weeks, very successfully, and I really just wanted to thank you for doing that. I'm interested in a report. Does it usually go pretty well with working it out with the county? And I know it's hard to determine who should pay for what, but I really appreciate the effort because I know it's hard.
I mean, I can speak to it if you want. I mean, they are very cooperative, and when we see issues that are touching each of our boundaries and we have to collaborate in order to find a solution, they are very helpful in helping us to get to a place.
And are they helpful funding?
Depends on everyone's funding streams.
Okay.
So, yeah. But there are issues, numerous issues like that are long-term questions on how we deal with some of the conditions where we're interfacing.
So I know the one you were just working on, there's an engineering problem there. That's a big deal. But the constituent was very appreciative of the response, and I appreciative that you did a nice job on taking care of that. I often joke when people say, now what's the boundary of your district? I say, drive it on garbage day. And if it's a brown garbage can, it's county. And if it's a green garbage can, it's city. And that's the only way you can tell.
Pretty much.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a much larger conversation in regards to curb and gutter that I'm sure that we'll bring up again. But appreciate you all being here. And unless there are other questions, we're going to take a 20-minute break and come back at 3:20. I know fire just came in and they are next, but we'll take a quick break. Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We're going to move straight into item number 6, the proposed fire budget, the fire department budget. We have Fire Chief Brian Dale here, as well as Chief Lieb, and of course Jennifer Bruno.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. Thank you. We're going to let you just dive into it, Chief.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
You're the guy wearing the badge. We listen to you.
So this year, last year went very, very well. Some highlights, the MRT, which you funded, has been doing very, very well. We've recently changed their staffing, their hours of operation. We're now covering 6 days a week rather than 5. We moved from 2 units down to 1 unit, trying to get them to have more calls per hour, and they're on the street for 12 hours. So what we did is they're working a 13-hour and 20-minute day, which means they're on the street for 12 hours. In there, we expect them to pick up about 1,500 calls, which is an increase. As stated in our packet, they're managing about 24% of the appropriate calls for them in the downtown core, and that's primarily in and around the homeless campus. And they're managing about 17.5% of the calls in their area of operation during their hours of operation. So every time that they're taking that call, a heavy's not going, which is good for O&M when the engines are getting 2 miles per gallon. And it also gives those heavy crews time for training or additional duties that they can perform. The other thing of note that I think the department's very proud of is that we are now the highest rated cardiac arrest survivability fire department in the country. We beat Seattle. We're over 48% of witnessed cardiac arrests are walking out of the hospital. And that goes to several things. We have instituted what they call a pit crew approach, where it's every person on that scene has a very specific job or task. We've changed some airway protocols, some drug protocols. We've added some new, what we call thumpers, which are automatic CPR devices for transport. And transport, when you're transporting somebody and you're moving at 40 miles an hour in a bumping ambulance, CPR is not that quality, not quality, and that CPR device minimizes that problem. Very, very proud of that. We've got national papers that have been published. Dr. Youngquist has published 3 of them now, and we're top of the game as far as cardiac arrest survivability, and not many people can say that. 2 weeks ago, we had most EMS agencies in the Intermountain region here, along with some physicians from Seattle with tears in their eyes, seeing how we're doing, the changes that we've made, which is pretty ingenious that we've been able to achieve that. Other than that, we have 2 new stations on the drawing board, as you know, and things are moving along very, very well. So I'll open up to questions or whatever we need to do next, Jen.
I have had the great pleasure of meeting your outreach coordinator, and I wonder what kind of projects you see for that position in the coming year.
Boy, in volumes. Darby Egbert is our outreach coordinator, and between her and Susie Alley, our firefighter development coordinator, Jason AC, our public liaison officer, they've got, and I think you were provided with a list of things they're doing. They're now in the junior high schools going to some of the PE classes, and during the PE class, they're engaging the kids in a series of little small trials and pull hose and do things. We've gone to a number of outreach or career fairs across the Intermountain or up and down Wasatch Front. They're doing, the cadet program is scheduled to come online in September. As you are certainly aware, we did the Camp Athena. We had 15 young women go through that, 15 or 16. The mayor spoke, you spoke at the last part of it. We've done some follow-up with those young women, by the way, and the majority of them, I believe it was 90%, when they started in the morning, felt that fire suppression was a man's job, and then we did it after they got done, and 75% of them said that they could do the job. And so we've actually got some outcome data from that experience with the girls. They've started looking at what's next in the junior high schools, the high schools, looking at some veterans, VA type stuff of people coming out of the military and their desire to potentially work in the fire service as well. And they have a 3 or 4 page list here. I'm not sure if you've seen this or not. It's an extensive list. I'm not sure you might be able to read it.
Attachment 2 in your packets.
Thank you.
And it's just, every time we open the door to see what's there, 50 people want to step through. And with,
Sorry, attachment 4.
So for our CRU team, our community relations unit, I'm trying to keep them on task and not forget anything, but if we go too far and get too extended, we're going to start not meeting our objectives. So they've got quite a list.
Do I remember hearing that there's a Camp Prometheus coming up?
Correct. In October, the next camp is a young men's camp. It's called Camp Prometheus, who is a Titan god who gave fire to mankind. So
my 10-year-old told me that when I told him about it.
There you go.
Are you looking at Athena and Prometheus being annual events, biannual, one-time deals?
I kind of wish that it could be twice a year for both, but I think reasonably with other training, South Jordan Fire Department, just so you're aware, asked us to do a 8-week recruit camp for their firefighters, which speaks to our training capabilities in Salt Lake City. And with all those training things going on, it'd be difficult for us to provide 4 of those camps. Maybe we can do something different, but at least one of those per year. for both.
So will you talk a little bit more about how the outreach went in recruiting for those, maybe for those camps, but also for your general recruitment? You had applications open this year, right? And that's
Correct.
only
We can
every
give you-
couple of years that happens?
Correct. Our test is controlled by Civil Service. It goes once every 2 years. And this year, we produced several events to try to encourage people to sign up and participate in our new hire test. First thing we did was something very simple. We set up times where we went to the Sorensen Center, Rose Park Library, and just help people sign up. Some people live in the city would be challenged or don't have internet access and didn't know how to sign up for our test, the interest list we call it. And so we did 3 of those events. We probably signed up 60 people. And I was a little surprised we got that many, but 60 or 70 people came out. We got them signed up. And then we did 3 test prep. So we had one fire captain, Captain Ginger Bear Claw, who was an absolute ball of fire. And she can't sit down. She can't slow down. And we had 2 other firefighters give an overview of what the fire department does, talking about our schedule, some of the challenges we face. We actually paid our test vendor to get a test bank of test questions. And then we had one of those firefighters give an example about 5 different questions and give the best in the world answer to each one of those. And then the other firefighter talked about a little bit about diversity. He's African American. Talked about what it was like when he came on, what he's seen, his history, what he does, some of the opportunities the fire department offers, and then we gave them an opportunity to ask questions. We did that 3 times. And the last one, the slowest one we had was 50, and the last one we did at Public Safety Building, we have over 150 people. No, where was it?
Yeah, it was at the Sorensen Center.
Sorensen Center. It was 150 people showed up. And so that was a very positive experience. The people told us that, multiple people told us that when they went to other fire departments, it was like, here, fill us out. And they were very impressed that we went going that extra mile and helping them understand the testing process and what the fire department looks like. We just gave the test. We had 552 people take the test, which is down for us. That's a little low. But the people that were there did, they've taken the first phase. And I can tell you that of the top 50 candidates, which we will move forward to the next phase we're proposing to civil service, we have 24% either women or minority in that top 50.
And that's up from what?
About
Ish?
12.5%.
So it's doubled.
Double.
I just want to congratulate you for taking a self-reflective look at how we can improve diversity in the fire department. It's been really fantastic, and surely not everything we try will be a win. And I think that you're taking such a healthy approach at it. I hope that these kind of best practices that start to bubble up over the next couple of years, I think will really set this department apart again. Not just as the place to have a heart attack in the country, but
not that we're encouraging that, by the way.
Not that you wish I don't wish a heart attack on anyone, but if you have to, you might as well do it here.
Yeah.
But also that you, I think, will become leaders in the region, if not the nation, for best practices around diversity recruitment. How fantastic! I think it's been a remarkable last couple of years. I want to thank you for that.
And, you were certainly instrumental in getting us to going in Kathleen. That was your idea, so I give you all the credit for that one.
Well, thanks. You ran with it. I just fizzle off ideas and throw them at people.
Yeah. The other thing is, one point of note, and I think that this is a very good thing as well for us, is we are the only fire department in the Intermountain West that I'm aware of that we do no longer mandate citizenship to take our fire test. I know of no other department in Utah for sure that has that.
Do we mandate it for hiring, though?
No, we do not. There's no reason for us. The police do have statutes that mandate that. For the state of Utah, you can be a paramedic or an EMT. You can work for the national government, the state government, local government without that. There's nothing that prohibits a person. And so we just followed state guidelines, which is a residency card or a work visa. And then they have to maintain that throughout their career. But most of these people are working towards residency anyway. Mm-hmm. So we're very proud of that fact as well.
So we'll go to Lisa and then Charlie.
Chief, thank you so much for being so responsive. I would echo what Aaron said, and that, a year ago, some suggestions were made, and you really jumped on it when we very first met with you, and I really appreciate that. I have 2 questions. And the first is when I see the 24%, I think is the amount of response in the downtown area for EMS. Do you have any concerns for safety for those officers when they're going to areas that we know are rather troubled? And I imagine you care deeply about the safety of your officers, but are we providing what you need for them to feel safe going into some volatile situations?
I think that certainly we're concerned anytime we have our firefighters going into an area where we know we've had safety risks in the past. To their credit, I think our firefighters do very well at sizing up their environment. And quite honestly, we have had situations where not the patients we're dealing with, but the outer ring, as it were. They'll kind of start chirping. We've had a couple of ambulances get slapped, little things like that. And they've done a good job with some of the security. And the police officers, when they're in that area and they see us down there, they're always driving by, hey, you guys okay? So we have had no incidents where the MRTs have been accosted or have had real issues. We've talked to them where they felt time to leave. And that's what we've encouraged them to do. Get the person in the ambulance and leave if you feel you're not safe. We have no incidents of our firefighters being assaulted or accosted or really thinking that this is a bad situation, but we are certainly watching it.
Do they have a plan to know what they do if they are in that situation where they do feel like they're in danger?
Yes.
And they're all trained to know, here's what we do, so that it kicks in?
So every 10 minutes, the fire department comes across and says, are you PAR? That's something that we use in the fire ground, which is an acronym that stands for Personnel Accountability Report. And we simply ask, are you PAR? Because if you watch any cop show, you'll hear code 4. We don't use that. It's every 10 minutes you'll hear, are you PAR? If the answer is anything but yes, they then turn to police and say, we have a 1033 emergency at this address. The paramedic could say, we're PAR, but we need police expedited, which means we have a rowdy group or we have something along those lines. And it works out very, very well.
So it sounds like it's working well. Then the second question, unrelated to this, I am familiar with what's going on with Fire Station number 3, but I don't know if my colleagues have been updated. So you want to give us a little update on where we are on timeline with, as far as you know, with Fire Station 3 and Sugar House?
My staff has made the firm decision they will not let me touch fire stations anymore. So Chief Lee is involved in that station, both Station 3 and 14. I'll have him answer that question for you.
Great. And he's done a really good job, by the way.
This one or myself?
You've done a great job with.
Really?
Yes. Thanks, Councilwoman. So Fire Station number 3, it is past the design process, of course, and we are currently looking at essentially the exterior of this building and to make sure that it fits in with the aesthetics and the feeling of Sugar House. I think there have been some concerns by some people in the community council that it does not reflect what they believe the Sugar House building should appear as. And so the design people, the team, the architects in general have been working hard to find a compromise that works with them and the city. And to be transparent and inform the people that are concerned that, frankly, we're building a building that needs to last 50-some years at least. So the priority is that it's low maintenance, it's going to last, it's going to be effective for the fire department and work for the city, and of course come in and the cost parameters as well. So I think they're actively right now meeting with some of those people one-on-one and hearing their concerns, trying to incorporate that into the final design, and then they will subsequently offer up a variety of other options possibly that are doable. Frankly, the architects don't want to present anything that isn't, frankly, they're willing to put on the ground.
And when are you hoping to have it up and operational?
The fire station itself? I think they're looking to break ground, if we're fortunate, by the end of this year, and the build-out is approximately 1 year. So that would ideally...
So end of 2017?
Yeah, that would be optimistic.
Fast and optimistic. Yes. Yeah, because usually double the time, double the cost, right?
Winter, all those kind of things.
Right. And council members, I would just say part of the challenge here has been that city ordinance requires that any new buildings the city builds be a net zero building. And a lot of folks in Sugar House would like to have a traditional looking firehouse to go in Sugar House, but you can't end up with a net zero building on this space that we have because it's very limited space and meet that goal. So as we've had community council discussions and open houses, I've said to people, you need to weigh these two things out. You want a traditional looking firehouse more than you want net zero, except by code, it has to be net zero, and that's what the architect was told to do. So it's interesting. Also, I like to remind people that the goal is response time, and that we want to have a building that helps the firefighters do their job the very, very best they can, and the design fits that goal. And I'm very appreciative of the effort to meet with community members to soften the outside and to do some things that make it maybe more visually appealing to people who want to have something that they have in their head that it should look like the old 13th East Fire Station that's a restaurant now. Yeah. And that's a great look, but I understand what the constraints are. But this building is really going to provide something very useful, positive, and efficient for the area.
Absolutely.
And just so you know, the rest of the council, we have a meeting set up with the chair and the vice chair of the community council on May 25th, and then we'll meet
tomorrow.
with the... Huh?
That would be tomorrow.
Correct.
Yeah.
Lunch is already fuzzy, so you gotta.
Yeah.
And then,
I'm just saying it's not way off.
That's not way
it's
off.
Here tomorrow.
And then we meet with the entire council on June 1st. With the Sugar House Council, just so you know.
Okay, thank you for being here and answering questions and going over the budget. You've had a very busy couple weeks with fires, and I just want to publicly thank you and firefighters for the great work that you all do. One question that I have, it's not in this budget, but it's budget related. I have heard quite a few complaints about the paramedic return, or the PMR program, and one question that I have is if you were to phase that out and go back to having a truck pick up, for those of you who don't know what the paramedic return is, and correct me if I get anything wrong, but anytime there's a paramedic who's transporting a patient in the back of an ambulance, the paramedic will ride in the ambulance to the hospital with the patient. The paramedic return program then has the ambulance bring the paramedic back to the fire station. And sometimes I've heard that sometimes there's a delay, but the biggest issue is one of safety, because the back of the ambulance is not crash safe. And so when did we start the program?
2 years ago?
Was it 2 years ago?
Year and a half,
At
2
least
years
a year
ago.
and a half. What would the cost be if you were to go back to just having the trucks pick up the paramedics so that they're not at risk safety-wise coming back?
Well, I guess there's a couple of phases to that. Number one, I would never, I would feel very bad about recommending going back to anywhere PMR, because I went to Costco on a Saturday morning. There's 3 Salt Lake City fire engines parked at IMC. I have a hard time justifying that to any of you or to the mayor's office, why I've got 3 heavies at 2 miles per gallon in Murray. We've had ongoing conversations with labor management about altering that somewhat. And so you have to look at your O&M cost for that vehicle going to any hospital in the valley and then back. And we've talked about allowing them to go PMR in the city. Let them go, Station 14 to UMC. It's easier to have the conversation if they're going in their district. Station 1 up on 5th East could go to LD or Holy or Psych Regional or UMed. But Station 14 going to UMC, that's a pretty long haul. The safety thing, it's theoretical. We've never had a paramedic injured in the back of an ambulance, by the way. But if you're going to get in an accident in a heavy engine or an ambulance, it's a no-brainer which one you want to be inside of. Would you get hit? But I would remind you that the risk that they face is really driving lights and sirens in the back with the patient, not seat-belted going back to their station. It's something that we continue to be willing to look at. I don't have a number for you.
Okay.
Fuel costs have certainly come down since we started it, but it doesn't change the O&M cost of the vehicle at 2 miles per gallon. Chief Lieb, we had a conversation that went as far as our new engines have the DEF fuel, and they don't put out much CO. I mean, their carbon footprint's very, very low. And so perhaps allowing the engines that have this new engine type to go PMR in the city. And if you have an older engine, you have to wait till your new one comes in before you can do PMR. We've had these conversations. We can certainly do some analysis for you.
Okay.
I think part of this is political and part of it is financial. As serving as a 35-year paramedic, it was the norm when I was a paramedic to have the ambulance bring us back.
Yeah.
It wasn't the abnormal thing. It was we did every single day. And part of it is just we've grown accustomed to the big red truck coming and getting them. The other issue that comes up that's an operational thing is they'll tell us that they have the ability to respond. Once they pick up their medics, they're back in service. But quite honestly, unless it's a really, really bad call, I don't want you to take it. I want you to get back in your district and serve your citizens. I've got 14 engine companies in the city. We are well covered. I'd like to get you back where you belong as soon as I possibly can. So part of that would be an operational thing, getting our people to realize if you've got a cut finger down the street, you don't necessarily need to pick up in the big red truck. I've got 14 of those to manage that. I want you back in your district. So we can look at it, and we continue to have the conversation with their labor management. It's been good conversation. They understand it. We've given them several options, and it wasn't as palatable for them. We said you just can't go everywhere, and so they kind of were biting on it as well to what would look good for us.
Okay.
Is that a good non-answer?
Yeah. No, I mean, it was actually a good answer because it kind of clarified where things are. I would be interested, though, in having you continue to look at this issue.
Sure.
And if there are, other potential solutions, I know that in the past, we've talked about having a taxi or an Uber or something like that. I mean, I would prefer that we just do the truck. But
yeah, I don't. We never had that conversation. I'm not sure who did. We never had that Uber conversation.
Okay.
Huh? Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
In lieu of the truck being, because it's so expensive.
Correct.
Just people threw out ideas of whatever was less expensive than a truck.
Right.
But and I would be interested though in the cost, what you think the cost would end up being if we were to go back to the
in the city.
In the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Is this a safety issue you're talking about?
Yes.
Like cut and dry safety, or other things?
Well, I think it's. I mean, from what I've heard, it's cut and dry safety because you have ambulances aren't crash safe. They're there to transport people, but if you're in an accident, everything in the back of an ambulance becomes projectile, and so it just seems like we're putting some of our paramedics at risk when there are safer ways to get them back.
All right. This is not budget related, Chief.
Okay.
But naloxone, hopefully it's getting out there more and more. But where's the department with that use right now, or promoting it, or I don't know if you're aware of much of that.
Well, I know that there are cities where they'll have Narcan or naloxone available in public areas, or police will carry them, or what have you. We've never had a serious conversation about it. I think the dynamics in Salt Lake City are a little bit different than some areas that carry it. Salt Lake City Council and the city itself, we are well covered. Our EMTs carry it, so every single big red truck carries Narcan. EMTs would give it intranasally, and our paramedics give it a variety of ways. One of the risks that we have with an officer giving it, and our officers are so busy that I don't see that as a real viable plan because we're usually waiting for them, not the other way around, no offense to anybody. But sometimes you can have an adverse reaction where the patient can be pretty combative. And we know how to do that and control it, where we just wake them up where they're breathing, but don't wake them all the way up. And somebody who is untrained could have an untoward effect of waking somebody up and having them go to blows. And so we'd have to do a little bit of research, but there are very few times when we've had patients that could have been saved that were not. We are well covered. Our engine districts overlap each other with engines and trucks, and Gold Cross carries the same equipment that we carry. I feel very comfortable that we have the ability to provide that service at a very high rate, high level. We've also had times when Narcan was very hard to get a hold of, and we were actually using Narcan beyond its expiration date. which is fine. I mean, it's kind of like planned obsolescence in the drug companies, but are you aware of situations where we were unable to revive a patient that had it? Or?
No, I'm not aware of any of those. I'm just trying to get an update. We've had a lot of discussions in the community at large, outside of police and fire departments, about the use of this, and with the state law changing, trying to get public education on that and how it's most effective, how it's not most effective. So
we don't mind having the conversation. Dr. Youngquist can give us some good insight. He's got a lot of data on that, on everything for that matter, but we'd be more than happy to be part of that conversation if you'd like to invite us, if we have more.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay. Any other questions? Stan's got one.
You do have some cost savings and some vacancies. Could you explain what those are projected for next year?
Currently we have 6 vacancies open on the department, and last year, as you know, we tried to hire 100% and have all of our vacancies filled. We kind of got into an interesting situation where in November and December of last year, we had 22 people on short-term disability at one time. And that does not include the 10 or 11 people that are on vacation or sick for a given shift. And it really we spent a lot of money on overtime last year. And we initially had thought about doing an overhire, if you remember us bringing that as a budget amendment, 102% of our hiring. But, you know, with the budget being flat and with us not knowing for sure what the right number is, I'd like to look at it and leave 2 vacancies just so we have that to help that budget out. You're giving us some money for outfitting some of our apparatus, and we'll fill the other vacancies, but we'll leave those 2 empty for now, and we'll do some studies.
And there was a discussion, Chief, a couple of years ago about evaluating some potential shift from overtime to full-time positions. And I wasn't making a recommendation. Do you recall that conversation? And did you do an evaluation of that, or did somebody previously do an evaluation? Because we were looking at the amount of overtime that was, I hesitate to say required, but that was part of a pretty conditional expectation, and whether or not we might want to consider shifting that to additional positions.
And that's where our idea came from for that 100, to overhire a little bit, because we feel that there's a point where if you hire more staff, it's still cheaper to do that than pay somebody time and a half for those number of shifts. Right. I just don't know. I can't sit here and give you an honest, good faith answer and say it's this number. It's 103%.
Okay. And those 2 positions are left vacant through the entire budget year? Is that the?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Chief. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Of course, Chief Lee, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Council members, we are going, I see, and maybe I'm wrong, Cynthia Miller, are you in the audience? Great. We're going to jump straight into item number 8, which is the Airport Advisory Board appointment for Cynthia Miller, after which we'll, unless there's another board appointment, we'll jump to item number 10, which will be divided up into 2 portions. So please, Cynthia, come to the table, and if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of a quick rundown about why you're interested in serving on the board, and tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Cindy Miller. I moved to Salt Lake City permanently in 2014. I have spent, I hate to use the math now, but over 30 years in professional positions. I'm a CPA, currently licensed in Georgia, hope to transfer that here to Utah. Early in my career, I spent 17 years in aviation, almost 15 years with the City of Cleveland as both the finance director for the airport as well as the executive director. Subsequent to that, I spent 2 years with the Federal Aviation Administration in Washington, D.C., as a presidential appointment during the first Clinton term. After that, I relocated to Tampa, Florida, where I became Director of Internal Audit for the City of Tampa. And then for 7 years, I was what would be the Director of Planning and Development for the City of Tampa. During that time, I saw the boom and I saw the bust, unfortunately, with the real estate industry. After that, we relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, where I became CFO for a nonprofit organization by the name of Chris Kids, which serves youth, teenagers, young adults that have mental health diagnoses, and provided counseling to them and their families, as well as group homes and transitional housing when they either aged out of foster care or needed housing as adults. Retired from there in 2013, relocated to Salt Lake City, I am now retired from a paid position, but I've become active with Salvation Army, with the YWCA, Big Brothers Big Sisters from a standpoint of volunteering from an administrative standpoint, and also for a time was an ombudsman visiting nursing homes and assisted living for Salt Lake County. So I think that's a snapshot, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I know that Charlie has a question, and then we'll jump into others.
Thank you.
Thank you for your willingness to serve. I really, the only regret I have is that I wish you were a little bit more qualified for this work. No, your qualifications are amazing. I think the expertise and the experiences that you will bring to the board are truly invaluable. So thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
Ladies first, is that what you're suggesting? Cindy, this is a joke from earlier today. Thank you so much. You certainly have chosen a very exciting time to come on the airport board. I counted 4 nonprofit volunteer opportunities, and so I'm a little disappointed there aren't more. Like Charlie said, because the nonprofit I'm with can always use some expertise. So if you're looking for other volunteer opportunities, please let me know. Thank you for your commitment and your willingness to serve in this capacity. Can you tell me what part of the city you live in? I know it was in your notes, but I don't have it in front of me.
I live in District 4, downtown.
Thank you.
Again, thanks, and I've said it many times before, but you maybe haven't heard it, that board appointments is one of my favorite parts of the work the council does, because we get to see time and time again what incredible citizens we have living in our community who are willing to volunteer their time on boards and commissions to better where we live, what we do, how we spend our money, and you are another amazing example of that kind of citizenry. So we applaud you and we thank you. This is a 4-year term, just about 4 years. And I hope that at the end of your 4 years, you'll still like volunteering with the city, and that your retirement here will be enjoyable enough that you'll stay, and we can find another way to use your volunteermanship. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we do own real estate now in downtown Salt Lake City, so I think we're staying.
Great. Welcome.
I just want to echo my colleague's statement that, we're really grateful to have such expertise in our community. And so I'm grateful for you for being willing to serve on this board. You clearly bring a great deal of expertise. And, like Stan said, this is an exciting time with the airport. We have a massive redevelopment project underway. We have the Northwest Quadrant, that master plan and future development coming forward, which I believe the airport will play a significant partner, at least needs to be at the table for that. I had the great opportunity to meet with Cindy this morning and chat about the Northwest Quadrant, Boeing, potential opportunities with Boeing in the future. We talked a little bit about Wingpoint and opportunities and concerns there as well. And I'm really thrilled to support you on this appointment today. So thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. It's just formality. We'll have you on the consent agenda across the hall. You don't need to attend, but if you want to be there, it's going to be a long meeting. You can spend your evening in the formal meeting if you want, but you don't have to. I'll see you tomorrow morning. It's the first airport board meeting. I get to sit on there for the council. And Lisa, we're the only district missing somebody on the airport board. We're bookends. District 1 and 7.
It's in your district.
Yeah.
My district uses it a lot.
So, Cindy,
we could do better.
Let's get someone from District 1 on the airport board. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Thank you all for your very kind words.
Okay, we'll jump back into item number 10. Jennifer, welcome back to the table for unresolved issues, part 1.
So I think the plan now is to sort of split up this briefing, and however you want to do that, just let me know. Unresolved issues is a sort of catch-all term where staff just essentially collects all of the ideas that are raised by council members throughout the various departmental briefings. Sometimes we're able to get follow-up information in between when you raise them on a Tuesday night and when the packets go out to the public on Friday. Other times we're sort of still in the information gathering stage, and so we keep it on the running list to sort of keep it as a reminder, but we don't have the full information yet. So with that introduction, I'll just say that this is a draft list. It's not complete, and it could be changed or added to any time, so feel free to edit. And I don't know if you just want me to start going down the list, or if you want to maybe talk a little bit about...
I mean, this is the first conversation. I mean, we have 60 minutes or more, but this is the first conversation of a 90-minute conversation that we're going to be having later, too. So. Right, and that's a good reminder, too, that I think in future discussions, we'll try to do a sort of more intentional job of linking different opportunities to your priorities that you've raised over at the beginning of the year. There's a lot going on in the budget, and many of it relates to your priorities, but a lot of it is stuff that needs to be discussed and resolved as well, that maybe not directly related to priorities. So we'll keep that in mind as we go forward. So I don't know if you want to start. So that being said, why don't we just jump into it and just give us a quick overview? Okay. Well, we've started the list with some of the sort of maybe more big ticket items, I guess you could say, because they would kind of swing the budget maybe one way or another, or require sort of a need for additional revenue finding. And like I said, this list isn't complete, but one of the first issues that was raised in a department budgets last week was the impound lot. And Councilwoman Adams mentioned it again tonight, that some council members might not be necessarily on board with closure of that from a public customer service perspective, and concerns that way. So you discussed it a little bit more in the public services briefing tonight, and I know that we're going to follow up with police to get some more information about their decision-making process about why they went away from the impound lot, using the impound lot. But I don't know if there's any other information you'd like us to look at.
Jennifer, this is not specific to the impound lot, but as I'm looking through this, and you've highlighted some of the issues, financial primarily, of what would be required if we were to explore this. Should I make the assumption that if you have information, it's included here, or that you're in the process of gathering information if it's not? Or
yes.
So one of the things that would be helpful as you go through this for me is, what do you need to know from us in order to move forward? Because I don't know what you've already gathered, or what's in process, or something like that. So.
Right. So the information that's here right now is essentially what we've gathered, and it's in addition to what was in the public services budget staff report that you were briefed on earlier tonight. So I apologize, it's sort of split up into two staff reports, so you have to kind of think about both. The amount that you would need to increase the revenues by in order to essentially reverse the recommendation for this current fiscal year would be $333,000. And so that's sort of an initial response. The other questions that you asked about, what would it mean in terms of the police towing usage, that would probably affect that number. And so I guess I would put an asterisk on that number, that it might change depending on what we find out from police.
And something that I think would also help me in this process, in particular about impound, but it may come up in some others too, is that a couple years ago, we had some pretty significant policy discussions about adding staff and some expanding availability, specifically to make the impound lot a more user-friendly experience. I think we provided the opportunity for people to contact someone and get their cars out of impound on the weekends and after hours and that sort of thing. So a little bit of that. I don't want to send you on an extensive research project, but if we have some sort of a recent history reminder of that conversation and why we did that, and I'm just repeating back my recollection of that, but there were some really specific reasons that we expanded the staff in the impound facility, so that would be helpful too, just to review that policy, see if we still want to be there.
Yep.
Thanks.
And so if there's any other information, okay. Well, we'll confirm that, I think, over the next few days. So if there's any other information that you guys kind of need as key before you can sort of essentially make a decision on this, just let us know. We'll take all this in and report back to you next week. So.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? Have we discussed an alternative to the close? If we had closed, is there an alternative to mitigate the public issues?
There were a couple of issues raised in the Public Services Staff Report that you could choose to include in a contract. And so I think that would be absolutely on the table, that, the council could put that as a condition of approval of the mayor's recommended budget, that would be addressed in any contract.
I'm thinking more along the lines of an advocacy sort of concept, where there's a position that's always available, that if we're going to contract with third parties, have the city be more of the watchman, and have a person or persons who, for a less amount than $333,000, could actually be almost a 24-hour service to protect the public, advocate for them in those situations we talked about last time. Some alternative like that, where it would still cost some money but not as much, but it would mitigate the concerns we had about exploitation, essentially.
And Andrew, that's part of what I think I was trying to get at too, with a little bit of that policy history, is if we look at that criteria, that discussion, we might be able to incorporate it. But I also think I heard public utilities say, or public services, say that part of the responsibility of one or two of those retained positions was to actually fill some role like that.
Yeah.
So
yes,
we might want some clarity on that, because I was originally under the impression that those positions were all going to get shifted. So I heard a little something different today than I thought we heard previously.
My understanding is that they would all be shifted to compliance, but that two of them would work specifically on issues involving impound lots, or rather towing companies.
Okay.
So, and my concern, I think, would be similar to what I think Andrew's saying. Compliance and customer service don't always go hand in hand. So we might need to identify that a little more clearly.
I'd feel more comfortable with that decision if we had a clear understanding of what the public would receive to protect their interests. Compliance is nice when it comes to Monday or Tuesday the next week, but not necessarily the Friday night, Saturday issue, where we really need somebody or people who are willing to be that advocate and protect people's interests. So.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chair, just one more note. I wanted to state that I don't like the idea of a single contract provider. I think when we create a monopoly of sorts, that we end up having larger issues.
Well, the service isn't as good either.
It isn't.
The administration had indicated that this would be a model that the state law enables, which is actually a rotating contract in a sense. And so you contract with a certain number of towing companies if they meet, the requirements of the contract, obviously, and then it rotates automatically between those companies.
I read it in the report that it was either that or a single entity provider, so I hope that it's only what you've described.
And I think the council could probably weigh in on important policy pieces relating to that.
There, I am weighing in on that.
Okay.
If I could just add on the question of specific criteria for a contract, I did look at Provost's regulations. They do seem very complete and to address many of the things that the council has mentioned, so we could quite easily work from them.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Next item.
On that one?
On that one
On that
issue?
one.
Okay.
It's a big one. Then the next issue is also not small, the transfer to fleet. A couple of council members have raised an interest in sort of addressing the long-term structural issues of the fleet fund budget. And I know that the administration's indicated that they're looking at that over the next year. So I think we've essentially just put this here as a placeholder in case the council would like to direct any additional funding to that. I think everyone agrees that more funding is needed. I think the question more is, one, how much more funding is needed, and then two, how exactly should it be used most effectively? So
you're suggesting this is similar to a CDBG process where if you want to fund something, you have to identify where you're going to take it?
There's a little of that, or I think if you have identified a lot of things that require additional revenue, then I think staff knows
That's a
to
bigger
go
conversation.
hunting for revenue.
Okay.
For revenue.
All right, thank you.
So.
Jennifer, do you want to handle these one at a time? Do you want us to just sort of pause in each one and see if anyone has any questions? Or
I guess I'd leave it up to you how would be most.
So I think that
effective.
if we just go through it, or council members, if you just ask Jennifer, first of all, on the first page, on page 2, if you have any questions in regards to any of those, then we'll move on to the next page.
I have a question on
Okay.
D.
So we'll go page by page, and if
Okay.
council members have questions,
great.
And
just
if
pop
they
them up.
don't, is it fair for staff to assume the issue can be removed, or?
I don't think so. I think we'll do one more quick round going through it and see if there are any other questions, and then we can move on.
Okay.
On the next day. Okay. Aaron and then Andrew. On
D.
page 1.
The training for officers working with sexual assault victims, that $35,000 that we did previously, I'm okay. I'm wondering what kind of conversations you've had with PD so far, or if 35,000 is a sufficient allocation to participate in other conferences and speakers that come to town.
I think currently there's 0. So
Right, but
yeah.
35 is what we had before, and
Right.
if we're going to continue something.
Yep.
So the 35,000 number was actually for use of force and sexual assault, working with victims of sexual assault training. So it may actually be more than what the PD would need. We can check in with them and see if they have a recommended figure.
Great. I would like that, if you could check in. We know that in order to achieve a sea change culturally in any organization, it requires basically years of sustained training and influence on the culture in order to achieve that. We've done 2 years now, and although there's progress, it is not yet the sustained sea change that we intend and that we've invested in so far. So I would like to know what kind of money they would need to continue that.
We'll make sure to follow up with them.
Thank you, Ben.
And the other benefit on the ongoing training is this is a nascent field. A lot of the neurobiology research is only a couple years old and it's still evolving. So there's likely going to be more policies they could adopt as the field progresses.
Andrew.
E, police social workers, vacancy savings. I would be interested in reallocating the funds, but not necessarily to the 3 open positions this year. I think there may be some other opportunities to help mitigate some of the bigger issues in the summertime with Fifth West and some open space problems with some of those funds. We need to probably discuss some more. So I'd like to save the savings from last year and still keep it in the same realm, but not necessarily for those 3 positions this year.
So do we have information yet on that recapture of funding?
Just under 200,000?
It's $380,000 for the current fiscal year.
So could you add that in? I'm assuming it was just going to drop to fund balance.
It would,
Yeah.
if it's not spent in fiscal year 16.
Okay.
So we could recapture that for a different purpose. As you say, the thing to note is that it's one-time money, so to the extent that it's just a one-time thing.
Sure. I think there's some concerns about the long-term goals I think are valid with housing and the multiple shelters concept or resource centers, but those are not going to come on in the next year to 2 years, and we have immediate needs downtown to mitigate some of the worst parts of that. So perhaps we can visit some of those discussions.
Okay. Great. Make a note of that.
Any other on page 1?
What was the total for that, for the social workers, did you say, Ben? Did you say?
$380,000 for the current fiscal year. And that's 7 of the 8 social worker positions being vacant.
7 of the 8 were vacant, and they were funded for the full fiscal year.
Got it, okay.
James?
Lisa.
You know what I'm going to ask about. You talked to us about the RDA finance position.
So the current RDA staffing document is proposing to add a finance position that would help navigate the RDA to be more aligned with the city finance process and proposals. I think that the intention was to have it half funded with RDA and half city. I think this is really more a situation of where the FTE is located to achieve that goal the best. And from the council's perspective, it seems always that putting the position in the department that they're trying to assimilate to tends to help steer the ship best, I guess. I don't know, Cindy, if you want to chime in. The funding could still be split 50-50. Any position in the city that works on RDA issues can charge their time, essentially, to the RDA totally appropriately. It's a regular city process, but it's just a question of where the FTE is located.
So pretty much then the discussion is where to put that person.
I think so, right? Yeah.
That's a large part of the conversation. Yes. Okay, thanks.
Just a little more. We understood the need to bring the RDA accounting and information availability in line with the city approaches. And so I think the finance department would be best equipped to get that transition completed. And so if they were housed in finance and accountable to finance to achieve that goal within a certain time period, it might work out better than if you put the person in the department. The council has debated before the policy issue of when someone needs an IMS person or a budget person, where do they go? Do they go in the department or the resource agency, for example, finance or IMS? So given that this specific circumstance, the goal is to get that accountability and clarity and transparency, it seemed to us that that would be a good option for the council to consider. We have found that the information is not readily available, so clearly the position is justified. It's just a matter of where it's housed and where it reports.
Council members, anything else on page 1?
Yeah, 2 things. I'm wondering if we want to continue this increased funding for officers in the neighborhood based on the police department's briefing saying that they were their goal was to get up to full staffing this year and that might impact that. So I'm just wondering if that's one we want to continue to carry forward, or, and I don't remember who brought that one up, but
it was actually raised after the police department's briefing as an additional idea.
So we may want to leave it there for now.
Raised it, so.
Okay. And when you say in the neighborhood, do you mean in District 4?
I think he means all of them.
Because that would be problematic, I think.
Well, I was actually referring to Rio Grande. That's what I had in mind.
Yeah, that would be in District 4.
So District 4, yes.
So, okay. All right. And,
you have another one too, Stan.
I do have another one. I wanted to jump to the design review fee, and I'm wondering if we might want to get a little feedback from maybe people who typically participate in that, because I would anticipate some resistance to charging a fee there. So I just wouldn't want it to be a surprise that we just wrapped into the budget, but might want to do a little outreach around that. We already get concerns from the building and housing permitting process, so I wouldn't want to aggravate that without having some process. I don't know. So I just kind of flagging that issue, Jennifer, not necessarily say take it out, but okay. I would have some hesitancy just initiating it July 1. Okay. So
we can coordinate with CAN, Community and Neighborhoods, to maybe send out a notification to the sort of typical people who interface with that and see what we get.
And then one that jumps the pages here. So the green team, this is full funding. This restores full funding for the green team, which we've funded 3 years now, 2 years, 3 years at least.
2 years in the annual budget.
So the 125 is that fully funds that, correct? And then the clean team is a gap that fills a sponsor that left, right? Okay.
And this was a legislative intent that the council adopted last year that asked the Downtown Alliance to find a fill for that sponsor. I don't think that's materialized yet, so I think that's what
that's my understanding is they still have a gap there.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
So we've funded the green team for the last 2 years. Is that what you're saying?
I think
we
there's
funded
some
a
mixing.
portion of
I think we funded the clean team for sure. The green
I
team,
thought this was a brand new program.
The
the
green
garden.
team, the garden is a brand new program. We funded out of RDA some of the setup costs for that, and I don't remember the amount, but it was not insignificant.
Looks like Allison knows.
But I wanted to ensure that that these two dollar amounts fully fund both those programs. That's what I'm getting at.
I share your understanding of it,
Okay,
and I
thanks.
believe they do.
and we can confirm how long the city has been funding the green team.
And I'd like to know what that went toward, because the green.
You're right. The first time, Jennifer, the clean team is the one we funded.
That's not what I'm hearing Councilmember Kitchen ask.
So
but
what I
maybe we
heard
can-
originally, just to make sure I understood what you and Stan were talking about a moment ago, is that the 125 has been ongoing for the past 2 years.
No.
No.
And that's-
okay.
yeah, that's-
So you're looking at the clean team. I just
The clean
misunderstood.
team has been funded for the last couple of years.
Okay.
Were you asking about how long the green team has been funded, or no?
I just misunderstood what
Got
you said
it.
earlier.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're good.
No, and the green team, the only funding that I recall to the green team, Derek, is to the RDA for the setup of the gardens, cleanup, setup, some construction
Infrastructure,
costs,
yeah.
infrastructure stuff. This is the first time we've seen a request for money to fund the training of people in that program. Their salaries, actually, I believe is what it is.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I just make a request? I think it would be helpful as we go through things, if maybe there would be a place you could put a little symbol of some sort that means RDA is a potential source for helping to fund it, so that we can recognize that. Like, for example, the clean team, so that we know in the past it's come from there, or in the future it could come from there, as we're trying to do the
I think
finance
it's
thing, change things.
my recollection, and we can follow up with this, is problematic because it's actually it's considered programming, and so it doesn't qualify for all RDA dollars. And that's why we put the infrastructure dollars at RDA, because it was improvements and that sort of
Right.
thing. But they have a harder time with the ongoing programming sort of stuff.
But I think it would be
For all
helpful
of it.
just for
But-
all of it.
Yep.
Any place there's a spot that it might be appropriate for RDA funding. Thanks.
And Jennifer, I don't want to overwhelm anybody. I just kind of want to flag this with a note that it feels like there should be some state-level opportunity for a job training program, and I don't know if that's been explored. And then they may have a grant that facilitates part of their funding for the green team as well, but that feels very much like a job training. Well, it is a job training opportunity, so I would like to encourage them to look for other funding partners as well.
All great suggestions.
Okay.
Page 2. It's actually page 3 of 6, but for our unresolved issues, it's page 2.
So items J through O.
So
Yes, Shirley.
on the EDCU contract, what is that amount?
I think it's 100.
Is it?
It's closer to, I think, 150. I'll tell you in just a second.
There you go.
I believe it's 108,000.
180?
108.
108.
You were closer.
All right. I just think we need to keep all of our options open. on that. So I was just wondering what the actual number was. So thank you.
No more discussion on that, huh?
How come that number isn't filled in on the chart?
We didn't have a clear suggestion to eliminate the funding. We didn't want to suggest it for you.
Okay.
So, but if that's what, I mean, if.
But it is an all or nothing, right? I mean, that's the cost per capita.
That's our,
It's a formula, it's a
Yeah.
formula, I believe, based
Yeah.
on either population or sales tax or something.
So I'd be willing to say, I'd like to see it as a potential revenue source, meaning eliminating paying the fee.
Okay.
So, just so it reflects in the,
Okay.
for the conversation, because I think that's really the conversation, is what do we get for that $108,000? And this is not the first time we've had this conversation. We had this a couple years ago, too.
I think it comes up every year.
Can I take
It comes up every year, but I think there should be more scrutiny based on
On recent
news.
And what we get out of it.
Well, yeah, but yeah.
And perhaps we could consider that 50% funding for the Director of Economic Development that is proposed to come from the RDA to actually come from this investment. From the EDC Utah. I'm sorry.
That's an
I need to
interesting
be
idea.
louder.
Balance that with a reduction in this.
Well, there's also been talk, too, about looking elsewhere to fund that, whether that's through a subsidiary of the Downtown Alliance or the Chamber or something like that, to find somebody that is 100% in seeking out economic development opportunities for Salt Lake.
And another thing we might want to just throw on this, I think this is where you're going, Charlie, but correct me if I'm wrong, is we might want to hold that money based on an audit review or whatever process the state is taking to ensure that EDCU is in compliance with their federal tax filings. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with a director who neglected that for 4 years saying, oh, we took care of it. I don't think that's necessarily sufficient. So
We can add that as an idea for either a contingent appropriation or.
Yeah, I do believe the state is looking into it, so we might be able to tie it to some action the state's taking.
Sure, I just want to see what we get. I mean, we can have confidence or not confidence in that organization, but it's still going to help us for the money that's being put into it. So,
yeah, we've got to figure out, what if it really is making sense for us to keep
that's
on
why
funding
that's why
that.
I'm not recommending that we pull it right now. But
Just keep our options open.
I think we need to keep them open.
Yeah.
how are we going to get that information? Then is the question.
Staff can follow up with EDCU and ask for it and just say what is.
I think that we actually have been tracking who has been coming to Salt Lake City or not, and if it's come through EDC Utah or not.
So we can get that report.
Or, they should be able to tell us what we
And
received.
I think they track it based on member cities. I think they showed at some point during the legislative session, I remember seeing some sort of report that had it broken down by geographic area and recruited businesses. So,
I think it's one of those things, that's sort of like another contract that we have that represents not just this municipality, but many in the state, that they represent a lot of cities. And that if the company doesn't come to Salt Lake City, it's probably going to go to another city that pays a due also. So it isn't necessarily specifically targeting our economy. And yet they do have reach into conversations that as of yet we don't, and none of our employees here do, and hopefully our economic development director will. But then we need to think about where we are investing and whether or not we have that kind of access. And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know either. So we'll keep it flagged.
okay.
Any other questions from J to O?
Sure.
Yes.
Should I open up O?
Go for it. Actually, before we go into that, any questions on J through N?
I do have a question on L. $4,400, is that real?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the only budget impact for that extension. help me understand what I'm looking at.
Sure. So part of the changes to the enhanced lighting areas will be that some general fund properties will be charged the new fee in the utility fund.
So this is an increase over existing in general fund properties.
Kind of. It's and what it was is that the general fund used to pay about $200,000 every year in a subsidy to SAA properties, and that is going away. But in place of that, the general fund will be looped into this new utility fee for enhanced lighting areas, and the cost to the general fund for that is this $54,420. The amount included in the budget was $50,000. So it has most of it. It's just
a minor adjustment. Okay,
yes.
Great. Thank you.
And we'll have more information about that next week.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
J through N.
M.
Okay.
Do we have anything on the books right now? Is this a brand-new intent statement we'd be looking at?
The compensation review?
No, Department of Service measurements. Sorry.
We don't actually have anything requiring measurements. We do have a reporting ordinance that we've been working on for a number of years, actually, to sort of codify in one place, sort of modeling after the consolidated fee schedule, sort of a consolidated reporting ordinance. And I think it could fit nicely in there, asking for sort of the same measurements all the time. Every time we talk about adopting metrics, we get very bogged down in what they are. And so I think the intent would be to have these be very high-level, basic at first, and then they would be refined sort of as time went on. But right now, there's currently no ordinance requiring it. So the last time a lot of them were updated was 2014.
So I like the intent a lot, and I agree. I don't want to necessarily tell every department everything they should be measuring, although we may have some ideas. But I do like the intent statement. The city should be able to quantify our responsiveness in all areas and maybe allow them to figure out where that goes. But I like the intent, though. The council's on board. I don't know what the budget impact would be for each department per se, because sometimes it does cost a fair amount to implement this if it's not already started.
There are a lot of things that departments are already sort of tracking internally that we've been finding as we've been doing our budget reports, and so I think the intention was to start with those things that are already being tracked, but I think you could maybe flag it to say that any technology or any other investment that would be needed to track things would certainly be welcome to come back to the council for additional funding. Is that kind of a good way to say it? Or?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. We don't know where we're at essentially right now, and so we'd be open to the concept of discussing funding depending on the situation. But I like the intent, though.
Okay.
N?
Actually, yes.
Go ahead.
Ladies
it's all yours, Charlie.
On the compensation review, I would like another legislative intent statement. I don't think that what we ended up with is what we were requesting. I think that there's some good that came out of it, but it could have been a lot better had there been more collaboration, which was the intent when we funded this in the first place. So I would like us to request that be done on an ongoing annual way, but I do think that we need to have, we need to be very clear about what the process is that we envision, because even though I think we articulated it last year, that's not what we ended up with.
And I think maybe the focal point of that process is when, in the process, the engagement with the unions was had, right? That the engagement be upfront.
That, and it was also the intent that we work with them to provide. They have a pretty good idea as to which cities we should be looking at and comparing. And I don't think they were consulted very early on, and so I think a lot of that was done without them, which wasn't the intent.
Okay.
I have a slightly different take. I think that Charlie's right that what we requested isn't necessarily what came out, but I don't. I don't believe actually that we should be asking the unions which cities. I think that that the contractors should be asking them what kind of criteria describe the kind of a city that matches more accurately Salt Lake City.
And that's fine too. I mean, we need to have that dialogue.
I understood that took place, but probably not early enough in the conversation. But I think that annually is really often, and that money is a significant amount of money that could end up going towards our negotiations with these very unions which happen on an annual basis, and that perhaps less often than annually. So how much did we spend on that audit?
I think there was $20,000 allocated to it last year. Maybe it was 30.
Here comes
Ben's
Ben.
got the answer.
Ben knows.
28,000?
28. That was a
good
great
guess.
guess, Jennifer. I would say that annually is too often. And you want to...
If I may just add, the consultants that were contracted for this said it was pretty common for 3 years in the industry. They suggested that's something we could consider.
That's what I was going to suggest too, Ben.
I feel good about that. And can we, besides legislative intent, is there a way to get at what Charlie and I are trying to get through into the consultation process better?
I mean, I think we can look at a contingent appropriation to make it more strict in terms of the allocation of funding. Obviously, if it was every 3 years, they wouldn't be drawing on those funds this next year. And so I think then the question would be if they're doing it every year versus if they're doing it every 3 years. And honestly, I think having language in the record is really the first step, because we didn't have that we had minutes from the meeting, but we didn't have the exact language that, hindsight being 20/20, that we probably should have had.
So, Charlie and everybody else, what do you think about putting $10,000 away with a contingent appropriation, or would it drop to fund balance in order to get to $30,000 every third year in order to fund the survey?
The Human Resources Department, if they have a contract, can encumber funds against a contract. And what that means is that it's essentially set aside from dropping to fund balance. And, especially if they have an active contract with an intent to pursue it.
So
we can maybe look at 10,000 this year.
Yeah, so I would suggest that we do it as an active contract and we allocate it per year.
Yeah, I agree.
But let's develop some intent language this year that directs what that should look like as a contingency.
And we'll just double check that with the administration and come back if that annual thing will work.
And my assumption is that there's not any money in the current budget for that, since it was a one-time. Okay.
Okay, great. We are going to come back. We're done with phase one, or part one of the unresolved issues. And we're going to jump back into the board appointments. So, Jorge, if it's okay with you, since Polly's here, we'll start with Polly Hart, who is looking to be appointed to the Parks, Natural Lands, Trails, and Urban Forestry Advisory Board. All right, Polly, we all know who you are, but come on now, just give us a quick rundown, why you want to serve on this board, tell us a little bit about you.
Well,
then we'll go open it up to questions. I promise I don't think we'll ask you about docs.
You probably already know more about me than you want to know. I would love to serve on the Peanut Board because I actually have been very active in open space in Salt Lake City. Dogs are just a part of my open space experience. I've been a director of Mill Creek Fidos for close to 15, probably 10 years now, but a member for 15 years. I have, for a very long time, been the sponsor of Memory Grove off-leash area, which means I help restock bags, clean up not just the off-leash area, but the entire park, and work with the park staff to keep the park happy and hobo-free. And I am an outdoor enthusiast, and I use open space. I also ski, I hike, I bike. So I actually am a member of a multitude of open space user groups. So my history, I have run for city council 2 times. I am grateful to have lost narrowly both times. Longtime chair, vice chair, and trustee of Capitol Hill Community Council, and former director of the Salt Lake Community Network, which is the Association of Community Councils. I served on the Historic Landmarks Commission and the Redevelopment Agency Advisory Committee, also on several county boards and committees. What else would you like to know? I live on Capitol Hill in District 3.
Council members, any questions for Polly? Stan?
Let them know how the rock climbing's going.
We haven't been yet. We were supposed to go last weekend, but we got rained out. But it's going well. I have led 510B. That's like that doesn't mean I can climb that all the time. That's rare, but I love it. I picked up rock climbing a month before I turned 50.
That's great.
Which impresses me beyond belief. So
I'm impressed that you're 50. So.
Both those things
I'm well
impress me.
beyond
Yes.
50. I'm 65. Thank you.
Wow.
So I have known Polly for at least 6 years, and I think longer. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate your willingness to serve once again for the city in your many capacities. And I can personally recommend her very highly for this position. So thanks, Polly.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Polly. We really appreciate you being here. And you obviously are very comfortable with the formal meeting. You don't have to be there, but we'd love it if you are there. But no worries, you'll be on the consent agenda. And just thank you again for all the opportunities that you provide for yourself to serve the city and the rest of the residents in Salt Lake City. So
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Jorge, don't get mad at me if I mess up. Let's give it a go, all right? Jorge Arce Larreta. Is that pretty good? How about coming up to the table and doing the same thing? Give us a quick background and tell us why you're interested in serving on the Sister Cities Board.
Okay, I'm Jorge Arce Larreta. I came to Salt Lake City in 1959 to go to school. I went to the University of Utah, got my bachelor's degree there, and later on my master's degree in labor economics, and started my PhD work, and got married and stopped my PhD work. Then later on I got a fellowship at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Was offered a job in Geneva, Switzerland, and I was on my way there with the International Labor Organization, and I got a call from the governor to come back to Utah. He offered me a position, and I worked with the governor, state office, for a while, and I decided to go back to Peru and see if I was born in Trujillo, Peru, and decided to go back and try to get a job over there. I couldn't, so I came back and stayed with the governor, and I've been here ever since. Later on, I got my MBA at Westminster College, and I serve on numerous boards, and I have 6 children, and I made Utah my home. I got involved with the Sister Cities 7 years ago. I was appointed by the Peruvian government as the honorary consul of Peru here in Utah. I served in that capacity for several years. And my love for Trujillo remained. It's always there. And I learned about the Sister Cities program, which was initiated by President Eisenhower, and saw the opportunities of collaboration between Salt Lake City and Trujillo, which is a city about the same size as Salt Lake City. Went back to Trujillo and met with the mayor there, a friend of mine, and talked to him about the opportunities. He wrote a letter which was presented to the mayor of Salt Lake City, and Trujillo was nominated as a friendship city to see what kind of work we would done, and After several years, it was officially made a sister city, and I've been serving in that board in that capacity. And I want to continue. There's been a lot of activities between Salt Lake City and Trujillo, cultural, business. The governor has sent economic committees to Trujillo to improve business relations. There's been some cultural exchanges, and I want to continue doing that work. That's why I want to serve with the board.
Thank you, Jorge. Questions? Comments? Yes, Lisa.
I'm so pleased that you're willing to do this. We've had the opportunity to work a little bit together and discussing having us have a sister city with Trujillo. So it's wonderful. Thank you so much for your willingness to give this service.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. You're going to be on the consent agenda tonight across the way. You can stay. You don't have to. It's going to be a long night. So we appreciate your willingness to serve.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break and come back at 5 to finish up with unresolved issues. And we're going to start. But Jennifer, I've got a great present for the council, and they're not listening, so we're not going to talk about golf tonight. We're going to postpone it till next week. We're going to try to get all the other unresolved issues spoken about, and then next week we can really dive into golf. So here you go. If you have questions or issues with golf, the four of us here, these guys, they don't count.
Let's get it done.
They don't count because they're not here. If you have questions that you would like for next week, please pose those questions to Jennifer or Allison. Great. Okay.
No questions. Great.
So we're moving on, Jennifer. We're going to skip O and P.
Are we really?
Yes.
Why?
Because I am not doing it tonight. I can't.
Are you kidding?
No, we're going to talk about it next week. Plus, there's so many other questions out there in the air that if you dive down and get some finite questions, we can have it all prepared and ready to go, because that is going to be probably the longest discussion on unresolved issues. So, Q, R, and S.
So can we talk about golf?
Yep.
I'm kidding.
Mm-hmm. We can talk about it after the meeting.
Two or three of you can talk about it.
That's right. I will not be discussing golf tonight. Okay. Q, R, S, and General Fund A.
Q, yes. R, yes. But why wouldn't we do R with the other departments that we also have no director in right now? Should we expand that? This is just legislative intent, not even, right? Is it just what is it? What does R look like?
We would draft it if you're interested, and we can include the other departments with new.
I think so. What do you guys think?
I think it's a great idea. No, I'm serious. We don't have any idea what's going on, really, with those that don't have directors.
And they may only be a few months into a job in 6 months, but we do enough budget amendments that I think it would be really helpful to hear from them halfway through this fiscal year. And so I'd request that we have that intent for all of the vacant department head position departments.
Okay.
So back to Q, the IMS survey, 30,000. Does that would not come out of our council audit budget, would it? No.
I mean, I guess it could in theory if you weren't able to find additional revenue sources to add to the general fund budget on a one-time, because I think this would be one-time funding. You just need to find one-time funds for it.
So I guess part of the follow-up to that would be who would manage that survey. Was our expectation that IMS would manage that, or is that something we thought maybe the council office would manage? Or, I mean, that could help us determine just sort of funding stream too. I'm not suggesting any at this point, but
We could talk through that with the administration and see what makes the most sense. for
So I
them.
guess part of the question is this an IMS managed study, or is this us managing a survey to help inform IMS? I think those
it's
are.
the latter, although I don't think the council office necessarily needs to manage it in order for that to happen. HR often does surveys that
Okay.
are a little bit more like outside looking in type surveys because they're considering sort of the perspectives of all employees.
And this was intended to be an internal survey or an external survey?
Internal, but like, would you say department to department, like almost customer, the internal customers?
Yeah. I mean, it's really just a new idea, so it could be developed however the council and administration thought would be most helpful. And it could include a survey of IMS employees to kind of gather information from them, and then from other city department employees to gather information from them, and just something that would be collaborative in nature, that would just help inform opportunities for how to improve IMS services.
So one of the things I think would be helpful to include, and I would like to see in the future some external piece, but I don't want to muddy that now, because I think there are opportunities for us to connect with constituents and the public to see how IMS is working for them in the ability to communicate information from the city. But there might be a best practices component of this. So if there are there might be a little bit of a research piece of this that we want to consider, looking at other municipalities that have some best practices for their internal IMS communication. So I wouldn't want to neglect that, because I don't, as brilliant as I think all of our staff are, I think there's some other opportunities out there that might be worth considering too. So I don't know if that influences the cost. It probably does. But
This
we
is
could.
a bit of a wag anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
We can follow up too
Okay.
with that.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair? Sorry, I was actually just in the hall talking about golf, so I missed this in case someone said it, but on P.
Just so you know, the chair has forbidden that word.
We're not talking about golf.
I can't just say I want the mid-year check-in?
No, I think we're going to talk about that next week.
Okay, all right. I can't say that then? Okay,
No.
then I won't.
You can say you're hoping to get in around
Say, hey,
golf.
next week I'd like to talk about the mid-year check-in.
Okay, good. Well, I missed that part, so thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
what's going to be different about next week?
I don't know, it's going to feel so much better, and we're
I don't
about to feel
believe
good,
it
right?
is.
We're not
You know
doing
how
it
bad
today. I can't, I'm sorry.
Procrastination feels when you
Uh-huh.
put it off.
Trust me, I know. Okay, we're going to
Feels
move
like
on.
$20 million.
Any questions for QRS?
Yes, just a clarification. We're just looking for reporting requirements on that. And so it's been a bit of a practice. I don't know that it's been consistent for public utilities to come to us informationally when they're in the process of negotiating. And sometimes I know that they've sought our input, although I don't think they need our approval. So are you looking for just a reporting of what it's done over time, or
No,
an
it's
annual?
more just to formalize what has been that practice in the past, so that it continues to be their habit to come to the council and at least inform you of
Great.
purchases that would
Okay.
come out of that fund.
Great, thank you.
And then, Jennifer, maybe on 3A, you could just give us a little background on that, the RDA STAR accumulated interest.
Right. So this, the $241,000 amount, I guess I would say, is a minimum addition, potential revenue addition, one-time revenue addition to the general fund budget. This is based on the RDA staff's proposal to the RDA board. The STAR funds, as you know, that it was a taxing increment district that was collecting funds over a number of years to pay off bonds. It accumulated interest and trustees' fees over all of those years, and so there's a sort of leftover fund balance now that those bonds have been paid and the account is to be closed. I think the RDA staff briefed the board on a proposal to sort of divvy up that accumulated fund balance in a manner similar to how the CBD extension is divvied up, which is the 60% goes to the taxing entities and 40% remains with the RDA. But in terms of the legal usage of those funds, I don't think that the council/board is necessarily bound to distribute the funds that way. There is an additional burden placed on the general fund this year because of the debt service that's directly related to these bonds, and so I think it would be a very easy legal tie to say that those funds could be used to offset the burden of that debt that's been backloaded and is now on the general fund's shoulders. It would be a one-time solution, so it's not a long-term solution for the 5 years of pain that the general fund's going to have because of that debt, but it's just something to consider. So.
Yes, I would like to find out the legal clarification on that. It seems to me like it was an assumed continuation of the 60/40 and that it may not actually be. And I'm not sure if there have been discussions with the other taxing entities that have made it seem as though that is continuing, but I want to know what the legal obligation is on that, if we could request that.
We have, and the attorney's office has that in progress, so you'll have that.
Great.
Soon.
And I know you have made a recommendation here, but just the thinking that we would use that to offset our next year's bond payment, and that could free up some money in our CIP.
Yes, or frankly, it could be used for
could be anything because it's general funds. Yeah.
Right. I think that there's the legal arguments about what those funds were intended for is that they were intended to pay off the debt. Just so you know, the practice in the general fund is to recapture that interest every year and apply it towards the bond payment so that the bond payment itself is essentially lower, so that it doesn't accumulate on that sort of 30-year basis. You don't have the sort of leftover funds at the end. They just sort of continually pay.
So this is a standard practice in city bonding. It
Right.
just hasn't been captured in this RDA.
Right, and so that presents you with an opportunity, really, at the end of this increment collecting time to either apply it towards the bonds, which is what it was sort of initially collected for, or make a different decision with it, I guess. But it's
so I don't know about other council members, but I'm interested in the legal interpretation of our ability to use this, and I like the policy direction of saying pay off bond with it, knowing that frees up $241,000 from general fund that would have gone to bond payment. So it still frees up some money, but I do like the idea that we're saying specifically any interest gathered on a bond goes to accelerate the payment on the bond. I don't know if that's policy at the city level, but it's certainly practice.
It's practice.
So we might want to look at clarifying that down the road.
Yeah, that could be part of your budget practice for RDA. And if I just could add that really looking at this with the idea of returning money or giving money to the taxing entities, the parallel for the general fund would be that any money on the, say, fund balance would be, any interest would be like returned to each individual taxpayer. And that just isn't how it works. It's assumed that interest can go for the original purpose. So, and what our goal as staff is to just bring back to you that information, and then you guys can debate the options, including the one that Councilmember Penfold has raised of putting it right to the bonds. There's probably a fairly significant tie there. So we'll tell you as soon as we have the answer.
And we'll know the legal parameters soon. Margaret's sort of grinning in the back. So you can just nod. You don't have to come all the way up. You can shrug. Yeah. Could you come up to the table if you're going to shrug, so that we can capture your shrugging?
We're working on it, and we've got some ideas. We can't use the RDA's bond counsel to do it, and we think this is of big enough importance that we're going to work with outside counsel. So that's all in progress. I'll find out timeline tomorrow and circle back with you.
Great, thank you. And so, and this is actually a decision would be made at the RDA level, right?
Right. I think
but
we highlighted it.
But it has general fund impact.
Right, and especially because of the discussions about CIP and the fact that the general fund is especially lean this year in CIP, with the exception of the road fund, the one-time road funds, that there's a sort of general fund nexus to it. I would also say that I don't necessarily think that this needs to be resolved in time for the annual budget adoption, because I think that this could be addressed in a budget amendment and it can still be applied towards the CIP fund or however else the council. Obviously, it might inform some of your other budget decisions if you do figure it out in time for the budget adoption, but that probably depends more on the legal analysis than anything, right? Do you think?
Thank you. Now, if you could find 3 additional revenue sources at that same level, that would be really helpful going forward in our discussions.
Working on it. The additional funds for the North Temple Viaduct debt service, this is just based on the final settlements that were received by the RDA in March that they were briefing you guys on in a budget amendment. So this, because this CDA is was created only for the purpose of paying off debt for the viaduct. This is sort of an automatic decision, and it wasn't reflected in the mayor's recommended budget because they didn't have the information at the time. So this would be applied towards the debt service, which would essentially free up either $35,000 within the CIP fund to spend somewhere else within the CIP fund, or you could direct it back towards the ongoing general fund. And it would be ongoing, because it's the new tax increment. Does that make sense? Okay. So then this is essentially just a list of tracking questions that the council members have asked. Some of the information we have, some of the information is still pending. So I don't know if you want to go through all of them or if you just want to sort of quickly review it. And
Jennifer, can I back you up once, just to the North Temple one? And this is an adjusted amount that's an increase over previous years, and I think it's property value assessment. There's some significant development happening in that area, and I don't recall the boundaries of that CDA. I just don't recall what they are. So could I get you to flag that? We probably have to go to RDA for that. There's a couple of developments just north of this, but I think they're outside the boundary. And the reason I'm interested is because in the next couple of years, we could see this go up again pretty significantly. So
the CDA that I remember is the block directly north of
I think it's the hardware building.
West, right?
Yeah, I think it's the hardware building.
Right, but it was a much larger parcel than just the hardware building.
Yeah, I think it's that entire block,
Yeah.
I think. But could we
can confirm it, yeah.
Thank
absolutely.
Are we allowed to ask, Mr. Chair, about golf follow-up information?
If you have direct questions about golf, you can either talk to Allison or Jennifer after the meeting,
Oh, my gosh.
or you can email them.
It just says that we would get this fiscal year 17 golf rounds by course before the meeting today. Did
Yeah,
that
and I
come through?
apologize. That was my mistake. They did send it to us, and I just need to forward it to you guys.
Okay.
So
next week.
Next week.
We'll talk about it.
Great.
Yep. They did provide us that. So.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I diverted you from your forward progress.
The additional information pending, if there's any other questions that you're looking at for anything, let me know. I think for next week, we'll have maybe more of a thorough analysis of the follow-up information that they provided us, so that might help anyway. Because right now, we just barely received it, so.
Jennifer, this is a timing issue, and I believe we expect the tax projections on the 8th.
June 8th.
And so we have a meeting on the 7th, which is our last scheduled unresolved issues. I mean, I'm not sure of how we are looking at timing because, I mean, it could go either way. We could, hopefully, we'll see a few additional dollars, but we're hoping in our timing to have motions in preparation for the 14th. How might that impact that conversation?
The goal is to have well, first first of all, we do have an unresolved issues discussion scheduled for June 14th. That is an RDA meeting night, so that kind of, whatever that means in terms of timing of the amount of time available for discussion. And I think staff would see that maybe a goal would be to have most of the sort of hard decisions made on the 7th. And then any extra, information that we get would maybe inform some of the extra decisions for the 14th.
So one of the things I'm thinking, because I'm hopeful that we'll see positive numbers, not negative numbers. And so maybe one of the things we can do as a council is to prioritize maybe some funding things. So I'm worried about, I know how complicated the budget ordinances are. And so I don't want to push that off to a 14th date if our expectation is adoption on the evening of the 14th, and have a discussion in the afternoon with staff expected to modify those ordinances. So I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity to look at some priorities for projects if additional funding is identified in that projection.
I think that the administration takes that approach, that exact approach with CIP, the sort of triggered funding. Maybe the council could discuss it in a similar way, like a triggered.
Yeah, so maybe we could do that as part of, we've done that in the RDA as well, where we've done some priority funding based on projections that we have been finalized. So maybe we could do that as part of that unresolved conversation on the 7th. We can trigger some funding that we may not have identified additional revenue for that could happen depending on those projections. Does that work for me, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Then next is other items that were raised. They don't necessarily have an immediate revenue and expense impact, but they do sort of relate overall to the budget and other decisions. The sort of big one is the revisiting of a GO bond for recreation, parks, and open space, and I believe 2 council members raised it last meeting. I don't know if that's another wait till next week in the golf discussion kind of discussion, but that was raised by 2 council members.
No, we can talk about that now. That's fine. Is there which 2 council members were interested in the GO bond?
I think it was Councilmember Kitchen also raised it.
So that's 3.
Okay.
I don't know, Stan, are you in favor of looking at it, or? We talked about it. We talked about it last year, saying that we would look into it this year.
We did, and my gut says that it's unlikely that we'll have a proposal that we could prepare for the ballot this fall. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it would be challenging. But I do think we could spend some really good time setting up some parameters for an ongoing discussion, maybe with a target for a ballot initiative in
next year.
17. Mm-hmm. So I guess that maybe the conversation we should have is how aggressive we want to be about it, because it takes an incredible amount of staff time to prep this for the ballot, and we got right down to the wire on our deadline for when it had to go on the ballot, and that didn't include any education we were going to have to do about the project, and I think the deadline is August, isn't it? Mid-August for us to get it on the ballot. So it's just my gut. I do want to explore it, and we did make a commitment that we would review it or revisit it. So that's just off the top of my head thinking.
Charlie.
I think something else that is going to impact that discussion and decision that we end up making is dependent on how our streets priority this year goes and what options we end up discovering to better fund street maintenance. It may be that we might want to put something on the ballot just regarding street maintenance or something else, and that could, you couldn't have we wouldn't want to have 2 things on the ballot. So I think that would also have potentially impact what we end up deciding to do with the recreation bond.
Aaron?
I was in support of it back last year when I think Lisa suggested at the time that we voted down the bond going to the ballot, the legislative intent that we would address it this year. We're out of time to do it this year. Mm-hmm. That's the real truth of it. And I'm disappointed by that. And I feel like the conversation I'm hearing right now is the same as we said last year. And I don't want to be disappointed again next year. I want us to be realistic about this. If we're going to say we're going to do this, let's set it up on the calendar so that we appropriate enough time for our staff to do the work and for the administration to have the conversations and do the public outreach so we can be satisfied with the process and it can really happen. And if we don't want that, then let's be frank about that now and not punt it till next May.
So that was my exact thought process, is that we need to have buy-in from the administration in order for even to be successful. So we need to have some long conversations, see where they're at with a GEO bond as well as with streets, finding out where they stand and if they'd be supportive in regards to the GEO bond. But there's no, in my opinion, I don't think we'd be on there at all.
One more piece of that. I don't feel like we necessarily need to go to a ballot about streets. I don't think there's any question that we need to make significant investments in streets. I think the Parks and Trails bond, perhaps we go for a GEO with that, but I hope that we look at other funding mechanisms perhaps for streets.
So, and we can't tie the council's hands for next year, even though there won't be an election, but this would make for a great priority for next year if somebody wants to look at that.
In preparation for that, there's some expense associated with developing a plan. And even though we have some initial outreach and we're going to have to revisit that, so I'm wondering if part of what we can do now is look at what the costs associated with having a schedule and a plan by the end of the year is involved, whether that's a consultant or whether that's something internal we have to allocate for. So maybe we could at least get some initial figures of what we spent last year on that and maybe plug in a placeholder for that for the budget next year. Because if we don't do that, we're going to have to come back in a budget amendment anyway to make something like that happen. So.
Well, and I think that begs the question, too, that if it's administrative staff needing to go out and do that, then you really do need the support of the administration to do that, unless it's a
right. But we could plug it in as a, at least we might be able to get a dollar amount to plug into our unresolved issues to say if we were going to fund that, here's an estimate of what it could cost.
Okay. And
Mr. Chair? Aaron and then Lisa.
Should we talk about scheduling something with the administration to have that conversation in here soon-ish?
Yeah, well, after the budget, for sure. It'll just be one of those that we look into to fill in before the end of the year.
Thanks.
I think it's, we did talk about wanting to come back and revisit it. I know the previous administration was seeming to be very in favor of a bond for recreation and going forward with that. I'm not sure that the current administration is interested, and given the amount of effort and time we spent on it last year and knowing what it will take going forward, I want to be sure everybody is in agreement on it, and perhaps the new administration has other plans, because how the bond came about was trying to generate a solution to the four-letter word that James won't let us discuss, and that if they have plans that take care of that issue, maybe we back off a little bit from that. So anyway.
I still think there's an opportunity, Lisa, and I'm not hearing you disagree that we could have a recreational bond conversation. It just might not include all of the options we were looking at before. My sense of the process last year was that there was a lot of interest in it from the community, and just the number of people who consistently were showing up to our public hearings and talking about, please include me and please think about this new sport I'd never heard of before. I think that was a really good indication that there's some community interest, at least in having that
We had
conversation.
a ton of great input, and as you know, my huge hang-up with it was the cost and that there was no O&M for it. And that's what, and you can't bond for maintenance, so that continues to be a concern.
The other thing I think is important, and this year was a little different because of the election and new people, but there is an election this year. There is not an election this year, so we can potentially have a commitment by the end of the year to develop a schedule and a process for how we would have this discussion next year. And I think, unfortunately, Aaron's right. We're out of time to do that now. We have to do it outside the budget process, and we have to start this way before the budget, because we just don't have time to do this in the budget season. So if we're going to do it, the real work has to be done winter time. I'm suggesting January, February, March would be the best timeline to do that foundation work.
Okay. Aaron, did you want to add anything else before we move on? Okay.
And the next item is really just a suggestion for clarifying some ordinance language. It came to light last year in some of the consolidated fee schedule discussions, that the current ordinance language that talks about the department director setting fees based on costs, but that the fee would be included on the consolidated fee schedule, kind of isn't exactly accurate in terms of how the process actually works, which is that really the department director proposes a fee based on what it actually costs, and then the fee is included on the consolidated fee schedule once the council votes on it. So the word set is a little bit misleading in terms of the current ordinance language. And it's a few different places in the code and a few different departments and a few different areas of fee setting. And so it would just take, I almost consider it maybe like a housekeeping change to clarify that. But if that's something the council is interested in, we could ask for that to be done.
I'm very interested in doing that, recognizing that we sometimes as a policy choose not to recapture our costs. So
right.
I think that's the important component of that discussion, is that we should provide that opportunity to have that conversation about a policy about whether we recapture our full costs or not. So I would support going forward on a clarification in those ordinances about that ability to recommend setting a fee. And I assume I have the full council support,
yes.
since nobody's saying anything.
The silence is deafening.
You good with that? Okay. That's 3.
And then
Aaron,
are
you going to make 4? Okay, there you go.
Then we just have a very short list of beginning list of legislative intents, and this was written at the time of the staff report, which was Thursday afternoon, and so we've probably added even half a dozen tonight. So I guess maybe rather than go through this language, we'll make a more complete list for next week, and then if you think of anything in between now and next week, let us know, and we can work on that.
I do have a question, and it relates to an earlier legislative intent about the ED report by the end of the year, and we've been working on this reporting ordinance, but is it something we can, I guess what I was hearing from maybe earlier, maybe I'm just figuring this out, that perhaps we want to suggest that all departments make some sort of reporting check-in annually. Is that part of the legislative intent, or is that an ordinance modification? Because we've been working on a reporting ordinance, right. So I'm just wondering where that falls.
I think it could be both. We've had intents in the past about measurements that haven't, they haven't had the teeth because they're not an ordinance, and so various forces, come together to make it difficult for departments to actually pull together an annual report and submit it with the budget, which was sort of our goal. Because it seems like timing it with the budget feels appropriate, because that's when you guys are sort of assessing everything at the same time. But I think including basic amounts in a reporting ordinance might be worth looking at.
My intent was for the departments that are currently without department heads.
Right. Right. And so maybe it is important to keep those things separate. So, so I guess what I'm not sure about, and maybe you can do this moving forward with our unresolved, is the distinction between modification to a reporting ordinance or completion of a reporting ordinance versus intent to get reports back from our department directors, in particular our annual reports and reports from vacant positions. So,
ironically, the reporting ordinance will help us make that very clear.
Yeah, I know, so, ironically.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. I think that's it. We've included the key changes as an attachment, since that's really what we'll be working off of from now on as we kind of keep track of your guys' suggested changes for each department or additions or modifications. So any questions that come up with regard to that document, let us know. We also have a couple of meetings set up with some of you to go over the budget in more detail, and that's really the goal, is to get really in depth on that front. So let us know how we can help.
Thank you very much. Any other questions in regards to this besides the golf? Great. We'll come back next week and talk about the 4-letter word that is golf. That's pretty good, right? All right. I think that is it for the agenda today's work session. We're a little bit early, but dinner is prepared, and it is in the mayor's break room. So we will adjourn until 7 o'clock across the hall. Thank you. Oh, do we have announcements? Yes, we do. Thanks, Cindy.
Sorry. Just one item, and that is the public safety building, the former public safety building. The administration has put out an RFP. The RFP has been awarded, or the contract has been awarded, I should say. The council, in property matters that are significant, does have the opportunity to request an extra public hearing. The council doesn't make the decision in the end, but sometimes chooses to do this to bring more transparency on property matters. So the question is whether you would like to hold a public hearing on the sale of this property.
Are you looking for a straw poll? Is that the best way to do it?
That would be helpful. So then we would know whether to schedule it or not.
Cindy,
It's mostly an administrative hearing, really.
And can I get this clarification? The part of the proposal is the eventual sale of the building as part of the development, or the property. Actually, it's all the property, not just the building. How does this line up with the timing for the RFP process? And are we going to lead to any confusion about people commenting on the design versus commenting on the process of selling the property? I guess that would be a little bit of a concern.
I think the one downside to holding a hearing is that you could create expectations that there is a possibility to change it when it indicates that the bid has been awarded. So
I guess the question I would have, and I'm not certain that I think we need to have a hearing in this situation. So I guess the question I would have, I appreciate the transparency aspect of it, but are we potentially misleading the public in suggesting that they may either modify the RFP or that somehow we would not sell the property? So this one seems like it's far enough down the road, and frankly, I'm pretty pleased with the response through the RFP process. So I guess maybe I'm talking to myself into not needing to have a hearing.
And that's entirely appropriate, just whatever the council's preference is. It's an extra step.
I'd love to hear what others have to say about it. I'm
with Stan. I think it's a little bit deceiving when the word has already been given, that they've looked at the project. But I can see the validity of holding another hearing just so that we are as transparent as possible. So I know that's a great political way to say it, and I'm open to both, but I would prefer that we not.
What are we being transparent about again? The fact that it's been sold and we want to hear back about the public?
Hasn't been sold yet. But a deal, there is, if you look at the.
Excuse me, but the award's been granted.
Yeah, and we don't actually have the ability or the authority to not sell the property or void the RFP. But, I mean, we have the option of having a public hearing about it, so that's the dilemma, I guess.
I'm never opposed to public hearings. It just seems like it's
a dumb deal.
Yeah.
Aaron.
What do we have, or do we have any say over any part of the process of the development of that future site?
Because there is no city appropriation of funds and no ordinance change, this falls entirely within the administrative realm. The hearing opportunity is something that the council added several years ago, so that if you had a piece of property that was very, very controversial and it had caused a lot of public discussion, then you could add a hearing so that those people could be heard by the administration.
But their comments could not inform the process, actually.
I guess you could have a situation where a mayor hears so much input that mayor changes their mind, his or her mind, but there is not an official role for the council except to
convene a hearing.
Yeah.
And I think part of the rationale when we did that was, for example, in public lands disposal, we have a pretty complicated hearing process for any time we dispose of public lands. We can't actually prevent the administration from selling off public property, but we could make it pretty political. And in that situation, I absolutely would want the public to weigh in on their sense of whether or not we should dispose of a property, even though we can't restrict that decision, but we can certainly get a pulse of the public. But I just don't have the sense that there's a lot of controversy around this project, unless I'm missing something. I think it was pretty warmly welcomed by the public in the RFP process, and then there was an announcement of the project, and in general it was pretty well received. So my sense would be, no, but I'm not opposed. I'm with James. I'm not opposed to having a public hearing. I just don't know that it's necessary.
So, council members, we'll just make this really easy. If you would like to hold an extra hearing, another public hearing, straw poll, you're going to do a thumbs up. If you're okay moving ahead as is, thumbs down. Straw poll. Okay. Okay. Is that it on the announcements? Yes. Great. Okay. We are adjourned until 7 o'clock across the hall.